Alaskans, how are we all out there doing today? It is a bright and beautiful afternoon this Monday, and hopefully you have warmed up from the negative 33, at least where I started out from, showing a balmy -2 out here in Palmer when I was just outside just a bit ago. The trial is just about ready to restart. Please make sure to like and share. This is your chance to make sure more Alaskans get to hear and see what is going on within our state. The first witness today is going to be Stewart Rhodes at 1 o'clock here just in a little bit. He's going to be participating virtually over the telephone, and they are just about ready to begin. So again, please like and share. You can find this video right now on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, at Politadick on and Politadick Unfiltered, and also on Rumble. Within the next 3 hours, it'll mitigate over to their platform. Please go to Rumble and subscribe. Sooner we reach 100 people, the quicker we'll be able to live stream directly to them instead of having to wait. Again, take the time, like and share this. And once our website is back up and running, please go to Politadick.com, click that subscribe button, become a supporter, make a donation today. Your support has made this broadcast possible. Thank you.
All right.
Hopefully we've got good sound going on here. It looks like they completely knocked out microphones for today. I cannot get them to reconnect without static, so
parties present. I can see Mr. Miller's on the phone still, I think, trying to get Mr.
I am,
Rhodes,
so right now, just so that Your Honor is aware of what's going on, is I am, well, right now on the phone with Mr. Rhodes' attorney. Mr. Rhodes' attorney is trying to bring him on the line with the jail, and we expected it to happen as close to 1 o'clock as possible, but we're still waiting. There are a couple of issues, Judge, that I could take up while I'm waiting on the phone, if that's all right.
If you're able to, yeah.
One, I know Your Honor wanted that briefing done today. I'm a single man office. Not sure what Mr. Dedukian's situation is, but we would ask Judge, I mean, I don't think evidence is going to close today. If we could get that briefing in tomorrow, I think we can get it in by tomorrow.
And if it's a short time frame, I don't have a problem with you filing it tomorrow.
And we do expect to be done tomorrow. Now, I don't know what the state's gonna do. I don't know if we can expect a rebuttal case or not, but, yeah, we hope to move into close on Wednesday if possible, but maybe we could do some inquiry just for planning for travel and other things.
Why don't we do that once you're done with the phone?
Okay.
But knowing that the issue is being framed, we'll discuss that later today, scheduling wise.
Okay.
The other, if you have a moment, the other question I had specific to Mr. Rhodes, if he does come on, how long is he going to be available for?
Well, so where he's at right now, he's calling in on the attorney line. That we expect to be interrupted at 2 o'clock. And then there's a collect number well, he's gonna actually call me collect, which will be fed through my line. So assuming that collect line stays open, we should have him for as long as he's needed. My intent is to ask him the questions we need to ask and then pass the witness. I don't know how long that's gonna take. I guess it depends on how verbose Mr. Rhodes is.
All right, the reason I raised it is if there's a limited window of time, I just wanna make sure that both sides do have a time to talk to the witness.
My expectation is we're gonna be able to complete with the collect call back to my phone.
Okay.
All right. They're still trying, Judge. Then Judge, I think that it's also appropriate to raise some other authority that I think is directly relevant to Your Honor's decision. And I'm not trying to sandbag anyone. It's just, you know, this is a case that we just found, and I think you need to be aware of it. The case is NAACP versus Claiborne Hardware Company, Supreme Court case 458 U.S. 886, 1982. And here, I'll just read for, I guess, until Mr. Rhodes gets on, for the record, I think some of the pertinent provisions of it. The First Amendment similarly restricts the ability of the state to impose liability on an individual solely because of his association with another. In Scales versus the United States, the court noted that a blanket prohibition of association with a group having both legal and illegal aims would present a real danger that legitimate political expression or association would be impaired. The court suggested that to punish association with such a group, there must be, quote, clear proof that the defendant specifically intended to accomplish the aims of the organization by resort to violence, end quote. So I think it increases the standard here, Judge, to almost a clear and convincing standard. I don't think preponderance of evidence applies, but I think you'd have to actually reach a higher standard according to what NAACP versus Claiborne provides. And there's some other helpful provisions in that case as well, Judge, that you know, Your Honor can review at your leisure.
Mr. Miller, to the extent that I don't think you're sandbagging, I think you're responding to the request for briefing that
What's that,
I've made
Judge?
to the parties last week. I don't think this is sandbagging either of the parties. I specifically asked for authority
Right.
on this issue. And so, you know, I'll wait to see the overall briefs. Obviously, I expect to see something from the plaintiffs as well, but I would appreciate full briefing from both parties on this issue.
Sure. Looks like he's getting it. And then I've got to join into the court system, so. Yes. All right, hold on, I gotta join you into the court. Ms. Rhodes, can you hear me? Okay, I'm gonna join you into the court. There's gonna be a period of dead time. Just stay on the line, please.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your... You entered 847. This meeting ID does not exist. Please re-enter your meeting ID followed by pound. Enter your participant ID. Please enter the meeting password followed by pound. You are in the meeting now. There are 9 participants in the meeting. You have been added.
Okay, Madam Clerk, going on? Ready to go? Okay, Judge, I'll let you inquire.
Mr. Rhodes, are you there on the line?
Yes, I am.
And is there anyone else that's joined us by the phone call?
Yes, Edward L. Tarpley Jr. I'm Stewart's attorney, one of his attorneys.
All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Rhodes, are you, just what state are you calling us from right now?
Virginia.
All right, Mr. Rhodes, this is Jack McKenna. I'm a judge here in Palmer, Alaska. We have present in the courtroom Mr. Joe Miller, who's representing Representative David Eastman. We also have Mr. Dorian Tadukian, who's representing Mr. Randall Kowalke as the plaintiff in the case. Are you ready to testify in this case?
Yes.
All right, so please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the statements you will now provide are the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right, you can put your hand down. And could you tell us both your first and last name and spell both for the record?
Yes, so Palmer Rhodes, Elmer, and Rhodes.
All right, Mr. Miller, you may inquire.
All right, thank you. Ms. Rhodes, tell the court a little bit about your educational background.
So I attended college at UNLV after I got out of the Army, and then I attended Yale Law School and graduated in 2004.
I'm going to jump right into the question about Oath Keepers because I don't know how much time that we're going to have. We're going to try to have you call me back collect if you get cut off. Are you willing to do that?
Well, actually, I might be able to go longer. I might be able to go longer on this attorney line than 1 hour, possibly.
Okay.
So I'm going to go as long as I can, and then after that I'll call you for my tablet.
All right, very good. Why don't you tell the court why you, well, first of all, did you start the organization called Oath Keepers that's incorporated in Nevada?
Yes, I'm the founder.
Why did you start Oath Keepers?
I started Oath Keepers because of my experience in my research at Yale Law School into the excesses of the Bush administration in the war on terror. The use of extraordinary rendition and torture, the use of enemy combatant status, and military detention of U.S. citizens, in particular to American Muslims, Yasser Hamdi and Jose Padilla. And so what I saw there was the same pattern we saw in World War II with the return of the Japanese, is a tendency that during times of war and emergency for people to justify violations of the Bill of Rights. So that was a major part of why I started Oath Keepers. The second reason was what happened during Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans.
What happened in New Orleans?
Well, I mean, there were multiple things that happened. One thing that happened was there were police officers who killed people just for stealing TVs and other items, and they were just shooting looters. Same thing, that mindset that during an emergency you can throw the Constitution out the window and just do whatever you think is necessary to keep the peace. And that's just, they were way wrong, tried and convicted for manslaughter and murder. And you also had people who were told to go to the Superdome for shelter, who did so, and then were not allowed to leave. They were not allowed to leave the Superdome, were confined there. And then, of course, there was the mass gun confiscation throughout New Orleans that was later determined to be unlawful, ruled by a court, to be unconstitutional. But the problem is the police officers on the ground did all of the above. And so that's a big motivation for me, starting Oath Keepers, was that while I was in the military, I served as a paratrooper, we were taught about the laws of war and what you should and should not do as far as following orders. In my day, they used the My Lai massacre as an example of unlawful orders that should not have been followed. Lieutenant Kowalke defended himself at trial by saying he was just following orders, but just following orders is no defense. And so, we understand that in the military, and the modern version of that is the Abu Ghraib abuses and the Abu Ghraib prison, torture and murder of detainees. But what I saw domestically is that when used in the United States, National Guard, for example, and also civilian law enforcement who were federalized in New Orleans, did not understand they have an obligation also to refuse unlawful orders that violate the Bill of Rights. So that was one of our prime motivators, was to teach the current serving about that oath obligation to refuse unlawful orders.
So when you started the organization, you also created a group or a number of bylaws and rules of the organization, correct?
Yes.
And what did you regard as the primary bylaw, or the one that you believe defined the organization?
Well, the mission statement was to defend the Constitution, the same oath we all took in service. But we had a requirement that no one could be a member, no one would be qualified to be a member who advocated the overthrow of the U.S. government or who discriminated along racial or nation of origin lines, and also no one who was a felon. So we have the mission requirements that would preclude those people.
Did you enforce those provisions of the bylaws throughout the course of the organization's history up until now?
Yes, absolutely.
And how so? Did you ever have anybody that violated bylaws that you objected?
We have people who, they're supposed to agree to the bylaws when they join, they click off if they agree to them. We have people who lied in their applications and were felons, for example, who we later identified as felons, kicked them out. We had, thankfully, very few, but a few people who joined who were actually racist, who we found out later who had discriminated along racial lines, and we kicked them out once we identified them. And we also had some people that joined who were anti-police, and were very much a pro-police organization. In fact, made up a large percentage of law enforcement officers. And so the person displayed an attitude that was anti-cop. That's just not consistent with our mission. Our mission is to reach out to police, not to condemn them. And so we would kick them out.
With respect to the beginning of the organization, did you have a website at the very outset for Oath Keepers?
Yeah, the first thing we did was a blog spot, I think it was, and then we got an actual website.
And on that website, you had the bylaws posted?
The first version of it, yes. We made it very clear from the, I'm a quarter Mexican. A lot of my relatives are half Mexican, half Filipino in California, and I think that's zero tolerance for racist. So one thing we're very clear about is that I've got a very zero tolerance policy towards anyone that discriminates along racial lines. And so we're very adamant about that. And like I said, also anybody that would advocate overthrow of the U.S. government, which means that a person who is an actual fascist, like an actual white supremacist, of course, hates our Constitution and wants to destroy it. And so does someone who's a Marxist, who's a communist. Neither one of them are compatible with a constitutional republic, and so we would kick out or exclude either one of those two.
So one of the things that I saw on the website, and I just don't have an understanding as to when they were posted, were 10 orders that you will not obey. Do you recall posting that on the website?
Yes, yeah.
Was that early on? Do you have a sense as to when?
Yeah, that was right out of the gate. One of the first things that we published was that. And what it really is restatement of the Bill of Rights, but adding to it the experience of the 20th century, such as the massacring of the Japanese Americans, the Warsaw Ghetto being used as basically a de facto concentration camp. So we added in the sad history of the 20th century to what we already knew was a reflection of the experience of the founders that they put in the Bill of Rights.
And I mean, again, one of the things in this case that has been raised, you know, that part of this, of the audience of the testimony is that these are kind of conspiracy-based orders. Is your perspective, again, you've mentioned the Warsaw Ghetto, you mentioned the Japanese internment camps. Did you write these for any purpose of creating a sense of conspiracy amongst members? Or is everything in this list of orders you will not obey based upon things that you saw happening in the 20th century?
It's based on history. Like I said, you know, a lot of it's restatements of the Bill of Rights. But then you add to that, like I said, the 20th century experience. And we saw in Hurricane Katrina, you had people confined to the Superdome, not allowed to leave. They were not allowed to cross over to adjoining parish. They were not allowed to cross the bridge. So, you know, this is reflections of sadly, of what's happening in our own country. And then with the enemy combatant status, you had American citizens who were detained, I believe unconstitutionally, in military barracks for 2 years each, with no access to an attorney. And you also had American citizens being executed by drone strikes overseas, including Kowalke's teenage son, who was killed, I think it was in Sudan. So I consider those, you know, obviously gross violations of due process. So yes, I think it's a reflection of all of its historical fact, not conspiracy.
So back in, I think it was the fall of 2019, there was a membership list leak or hack of the Oath Keepers website. Apparently the membership list was there. And I think at the time that the number that was stated publicly was 38,000 members of Oath Keepers. What is your understanding, at least in the fall of 2019, as to the number of Oath Keepers that consider themselves members?
Yeah, that's about right. We're approximately 40,000 at our peak. So that's pretty accurate. 38,000.
Did that change much by the time of January 6, 2021?
I mean, a little bit, not much. I mean, it goes up and down, of course, like any membership of any organization. It goes up and down. But I think, like I said, at our peak, we're about 40,000. Not sure what our membership was on January 6th, but I would imagine it's not much less than that.
So part of this case has also been the organization and how it's governed. I guess the way I'd like to ask this, what type of leadership style have you used over the organization? Would you consider it to be a kind of a strict military type hierarchy, or do you govern?
No, we're dealing with volunteers. You can't court-martial them, you can't send them Leavenworth, you know, it's just, you're not paying them. So you have unpaid volunteers. So long as they adhere to the bylaws and also adhere to our mission statement, defending the Constitution, but also, I should call it a sub-statement, which is reach, teach, and inspire. To reach out to the current serving, to teach them more about the Constitution they swore an oath to defend, and then to inspire them to refuse unlawful orders. So we would use it, for example, open letter we did in 2014 to the governor of Missouri, condemning the police response, the initial police response to the protesters after Michael Brown's killing. We criticized their heavy-handed response, their use of curfews, the shutdown of free speech, their pepper spraying the entire crowd, including journalists. And we also criticized them pointing rifles at people. This was, you know, excessive force and threat of force. And then we had our police officers write up a critique and saying, well, here's how you should do it right. Send undercover officers into the crowd, identify the actual criminals who are throwing rocks or bottles or discharging weapons, and that's who you arrest. You don't target the entire crowd. So that was our mission, was to reach out to the current serving in particular and teach them better ways to handle things without violating people's rights. So long as someone adhered to the mission, and like I said, if someone's anti-cop, that wasn't consistent with our mission. It would make no sense to have someone like that in our leadership. But so long as they adhere to our mission and also our bylaws, we give them pretty wide latitude to work the mission in their community as they saw fit. But I would step in if I saw a problem. So that's considered a leadership by exception, which means I give them broad discretion. If I see a problem, I step in and put a stop to it.
So with respect to what you were talking about with Michael Brown's killing and the violence that erupted in Missouri, is that the Ferguson riots that you're referring to?
Right, in 2014.
Okay.
So our first action we did there was to critique the initial police response, which was way over the top. You know, they're pointing rifles at everybody. It's just ridiculous.
And was there a little bit of tension that arose between you and the police chief as a result of that?
Objection relevance?
No, not the police chief. The Ferguson PD was actually very friendly to us.
Hold
But
on
it was
just one second,
it was the
please.
sheriff.
Sorry, Mr. Rhodes, hold on just one second, we had an objection.
The objection is to the relevance of what happened in Ferguson.
Mr.
It
Rhodes.
speaks directly to what their expert testified to, saying that these were violent people in Ferguson, and that in fact they were even criticized by the police chief. And so this is responsive to that.
Okay, it's relevant to the testimony that was provided about both the leadership structure and the way that the group reported back, as well as then it's fair response to the expert testimony, so please continue.
Yeah, so, Mr. Rhodes, if you could respond then to the criticism that was lodged against you by I guess you said it was the sheriff, the county sheriff.
Yes, what the sheriff did is one of his lieutenants showed up and ordered our guys off the roof, which they complied. I wasn't there, but they complied and came down. And then they said that we could not be providing security, volunteer security, without a certificate or the licensing for Missouri. And I hired 2 attorneys there in Missouri, and they researched the law and can find out that only applies if you're paid security. Volunteer security does not have to comply with licensure requirements. And so we prevailed, and then once the sheriff was clued in on the law, he retracted and allowed us back up on the rooftop. So then we went back up after the fight was over legally.
In addition to critiquing the police response in Ferguson, were you also providing security there?
Yes, the first client was Natalie DuBois, who owned a bakery called Natalie's Cakes and More, a black lady, who, the first night of riots, they broke her windows, and then they threatened to burn down the entire block of buildings. They said, we're going to burn this bitch down tomorrow night. And above the shops were apartments with families in them.
And so how long were Oath Keepers on site offering security to that residential?
I believe it was at least, I think, 3 weeks. We were there through Thanksgiving. So her other neighbors agreed to consent to us being on the rooftop, and then the people who lived in the apartments, of course, were happy too. All around us, there were buildings burned to the ground, but not that block of buildings.
With respect to other efforts that Oath Keepers have conducted since its founding, could you give the court just kind of an assessment of the various humanitarian relief work that you've done, other security work you've done since 2009?
Sure. So on the humanitarian side, we did 14 hurricane relief missions, including Hurricane Harvey. That was the first big one. And also in Puerto Rico. We were there for 3 weeks in Puerto Rico. And I was at both of those. And we did multiple other hurricane relief missions in Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, all along the Gulf Coast. And each one of those, we have a lot of medics, our combat medics, and a lot of firefighters and paramedics. So we would do, direct relief and medical checks and wellness checks. And we would also, because we have a lot of police officers and also military veterans, combat arms veterans, we would also provide security for doctors and nurses who were afraid to go into the rougher areas. There were some sections in Houston, for example, that were all like illegal alien, basically, communities that had been abandoned. No one had been there to give any relief. So we went in. Red Cross and other groups are afraid to go into places they consider to be gang-dominated, like some of the barrios in Puerto Rico. But we're not afraid of that, so we would go in there, and very safely, by the way. The gang members, once they realized we were just there to give relief, didn't bother us. And so we went in and gave relief and then did escorts for medical personnel. And we also guarded a warehouse in Houston. The warehouse owner requested our assistance. It was a distribution point for a hub for relief supplies. Trucks would come in, unload, and then take them out to the communities that needed it. And he asked us to come protect it because it was a gang-infested area. There were rival gangs on the other side of the warehouse. So we protected the warehouse.
So which hurricane was that in Houston?
That was Hurricane Harvey in Texas. And we also did a lot of ride-alongs with local sheriff deputies.
Where? They're in Houston?
And the National Guard. Yes. Well, actually, it was down towards the, I don't remember the name of the area, but in more rural areas, there were areas where the local sheriffs were just overwhelmed, and the National Guard from Louisiana came in to help, but they were not allowed to be armed, so they were defenseless, and you had local drug addicts and gangs who were taking advantage of the situation and robbing people, doing carjackings and truck jackings. And so we would do security where we would protect the National Guardsmen.
So there was some testimony, of course, that you did not hear early on regarding a mayor or some city official at Houston either hugging you or congratulating you or some other leader of Oath Keepers. Do you know?
Yeah, well, the mayor of Houston, yes, the mayor of Houston visited the warehouse that we were protecting, and gave me a hug and said thank you. We were there to help.
What other type?
We have great relationships with local law enforcement. We always reach out to them. I have my cops go talk to their cops and make sure they understand who we are, how to identify us, how to reach our leadership, and we always coordinate as best we can with local law enforcement.
So when you say my cops talk to their cops, are you talking about retired cops and Oath Keepers or active cops and Oath Keepers?
Yes, well, retired and current serving. Some of our guys are still current serving, and they just take a leave of absence to come do a hurricane operation, for example. And others are retired. And so I always put, wherever possible, I put law enforcement, either current or retired, in command. So that local law enforcement knows that the people in charge understand civilian rules of engagement, understand the police officer's job, what they're trying to do, so that we are an asset, not a liability, and stand in their way. And we actually are providing help, not hindrance.
Do you have any sense as to the percentage of members of Oath Keepers that are retired or current serving law enforcement?
If I had to guess, I'd say somewhere around 30%. So, yeah, about 30%. Then the rest would be military veterans like myself or firefighters. I was a firefighter for a while too. And there's a lot of firefighters at EMS also, EMTs and paramedics. But I would say 30% law enforcement.
So you indicated earlier that you have had some efforts by some who are white nationalists or white supremacist, anti-Semites join your organization, and when you found out, you've kicked them out. Have you ever been invited to any?
That's right.
Have you ever been invited to any events that you've declined because of concerns about white supremacy or anti-Semitic activity?
Yes, we stayed, well, we didn't get invited, but we stayed completely clear of Charlottesville. I knew it was going to be a Nazi fest. It was organized by a bunch of white supremacists. They had David Duke speaking for crying out loud. So I told all Oath Keepers to stay the hell away from Charlottesville, absolutely. But there was a situation in Portland where we were supposed to be providing security. It was the Patriot Prayer Rally, who we had done security for before, and the Proud Boys were going to be there. But the problem is they invited a group called American Guard, and I looked into them, and they were a bunch of people, a bunch of guys that claimed to be, former white supremacists. But I found a video of their leader, who was a notorious white supremacist back in the day. He now claims to be a former white supremacist, but in the video he was saying, we still have friends in the movement, and they're allowed to come to our events, and you're allowed to go to their events, wink, wink. So I said, this guy's not a former white supremacist, he's still a white supremacist. And so we pulled out of the event, made a very public announcement about why. And that caused a lot of bad blood between me and the Proud Boys. Because I made it very public. I wanted to make it public because I wanted people to know that we're not going to be there and why. And I don't have any tolerance for white supremacy.
So have there been any other?
They consider them a curse on the conservative movement. They're always trying to weed their way in. And we need to be very militant about excluding them. That's my opinion.
So, eventually, how did you address your membership itself? How did you determine whether or not members coming into Oath Keepers had affiliation with any of these groups that you don't want anything to do with, the white supremacist, white nationalist, anti-Semitic groups?
Well, we go through their social media very carefully. And we've found people, of course, the left has sent people in to spy on us. We found people that were actually leftists. People were not there to take part in our mission, but were there to spy on us, be disruptive. And so same thing. If they're a Marxist, I consider them incompatible with the Constitution. If they're white supremacists, same thing. So once we identify them, we kick them out. And you can usually talk about the social media and also by doing an in-person interview. And very few white supremacists ever tried to join Oath Keepers because they friggin' hate me. They hate my guts, which I'm fine with. I'm perfectly fine with that. I consider it a badge of honor.
So I want to go back kind of some of this humanitarian relief. You said 14 hurricane relief missions. Any other type of humanitarian relief Oath Keepers did since 2009?
Oh, sure. Just floods, tornadoes, wildfires, just anything across the country. Our local chapters were encouraged to chip in and pitch in and help where they could. And because so many of our guys are like former combat engineers, for example, or former combat medics, they have a lot of skill sets that could be applicable during an emergency. And quite a few of them are also firefighters or search and rescue themselves. So yeah, they would go out like during a blizzard and pull people out of the snowbanks, things like that.
So
as a matter of course, always doing that.
You mentioned that.
In fact, and I also encourage our membership to join the local volunteer fire department, their volunteer EMS service, and anything they could in their community to help out.
You mentioned that at Ferguson.
I served as a volunteer firefighter in Montana.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut across over you.
No, you're quite all right. We've got a bit of a lag, so we're just trying to deal with that. So you said at Ferguson you were providing security. Were there other events that you provided security at by way of the Oath Keeper organization since 2009?
Oh yeah, all over the country. In fact, especially after Trump's election, the left unfortunately began to suppress free speech through violence. The first example was the inauguration. We were before the inauguration, and we were on the ground at the inauguration of Trump. And you had I think it was called Refuse Fascism, was a group that was started by the left in reaction to Trump, and they declared they were not going to tolerate a fascist regime, and they also swore they were going to prevent him from being inaugurated. And they tried. They had black blocks of Antifa, dressed all in black, trying to block the entrances to get into the inauguration. And we were there on the ground with a team providing security escorts. It was our first security escort mission for Trump supporters when Trump was elected. So escorting people back to the metro stops, families or those who are vulnerable.
And we're going to get into more detail with what you've done.
Without incident too, by the way.
What's that?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, say your last statement again, please.
Yeah, I said without incident. I said so. This is something that is important to clarify. Is that we have all of the things we've done across the country, all of the security escort operations. We did 12 Trump rallies, providing escorts outside the rally, escort Trump supporters back to their cars, back to their hotels, because Antifa likes to attack people when they're leaving a venue. So we would have our guys standing outside, and if they're lawful to carry wherever they were, they'd also be carrying a firearm. And our guys would be escorting the Trump supporters back to their cars. In particular, the elderly, people, veterans, women, and families.
So one of the statistics that was provided by plaintiffs' experts in this case is that where Oath Keepers were involved in events throughout the country, compared to other extreme organizations, there was a marked increase of violence by 20%. Do you have any experience or information that could address that particular figure that was provided by those experts?
That's ridiculous. That's absolutely false. Whoever said that committed perjury. No. In fact, I would challenge them to provide any evidence of that. It's quite the opposite. Our guys deter by their presence alone, and we're quiet professionals. They can yell all they want. We don't yell back. We're not seeking to fist fight with them, unlike Proud Boys and other groups that want to fist fight. We don't. All we want to do is escort the people that we're escorting to safety. And I think because of our high percentage of law enforcement officers, Antifa did not close on us. They left us alone. And it's also, I think, important because we're not trying to antagonize them. They know we're just going to be walking through, escorting the people to their hotel or their car. And so they never closed on us. So you cannot find I challenge anyone to go find one single police report of an Oath Keeper assaulting anyone during a security operation. You're not going to find it. There are no arrests or anything, no use of force incidents. We've never punched anybody, never pepper sprayed anybody, never hit anybody with a baton, ever, across the country in hundreds of events. Because we don't close on them, they don't close on us, and we're only protective and defensive.
So the first security operation that Oath Keepers participated in Washington D.C. was the inauguration in 2020. Is that correct?
Well, actually, it was the deplorable a few days before. There was a group of ladies who were afraid to attend the deplorable event downtown D.C. and we provided an escort. I was part of that escort.
And let me correct that. I said 2020. I meant to say 2016. So what you're referring to happened in
2017, actually.
2017, correct, in January.
I'm sorry, it was 2017. Yeah.
Right. All right. So
yeah, that was our first security operation for Trump supporters. That's right.
And how many security operations did you do in 2017 for the inauguration?
It's hard. Well, it was the inauguration itself. Then after that, Berkeley was the next one because there had been the Milo Yiannopoulos attempt speech at Berkeley on the college campus, and it was shut down by Antifa violence. He canceled his event. The security team pulled him out because they were lighting things on fire and trashing the place. And then there was a rally held in Martin Luther King Park in early March, and we watched it on television, live stream, and we watched the police stand back and allow the Antifa to attack the Trump supporters in the park and beat them. And we watched that, and that's when we decided the next rally they held there, we stepped in and provided security and held a successful rally without any violence. There was violence in the street outside the park where like other groups, like the Proud Boys, were street fighting with the leftists, but we were not. We stayed in the park, and all we did is provide security for the event. And the event was peaceful without incident because, like I said, Antifa did not close on us. They never have, actually.
Let's move forward to the fall of 2020, immediately before the election. You sent out an email on November 3rd to members of Oath Keepers entitled, Oath Keepers Critical Message to Patriots on Election Day. Do you have that email anywhere near you?
I don't have that in front of me. I don't, unfortunately. But I do remember it.
Okay, so you recall it. Do you recall that there was a second section to that email, what to do today?
Yeah, we were encouraging them to be observers, as we had done in prior elections. We always encourage our members to take part, be election judges or poll watchers. But we also encourage our membership to be on the lookout for any indications of election fraud. But we told them to do so without being overt, not wearing Oath Keeper gear, because I don't want to be accused of intimidating voters. So we had told them to not wear your Oath Keeper hats or T-shirts when you do this, and do not, of course, carry weapons openly. So you don't want to be accused of intimidating people, which is what would happen if anyone had done any of those things.
Were you asked to provide any type of security in Washington, D.C. after the election in November 2020? Yes, we were asked to provide security at multiple events in November, December, and January. Okay, tell the court a little bit about the events.
3 different times.
Let's start with November.
Okay.
So
in November, we had, go ahead.
Yeah, what events? Go ahead.
Right, so in November, it was the Million MAGA March, I believe is what it was called. And the particular mission we did was, well, there was two. One was there were some ladies who were speakers, VIP guest speakers, again, who were afraid to go into D.C. without security. So we escorted them into D.C. We escorted them and marched from the Freedom Plaza to the Supreme Court to speak. And they tagged along with Alex Jones' security team. So my guys who were in charge of those ladies was a current serving, one in command was a current serving constable and retired Houston Police Department detective named John Shirley from Texas. He was a current serving lawman. He was in charge, and second in command was a police veteran named Michael Green. And so they were the two in charge of that detail to escort the ladies all the way to the Supreme Court. And the other mission I was in charge of, and that was a general escort mission, like we have done in many of the Trump rallies, to escort people after the rallies were over back to their hotel or back to their metro stops.
And was that after the Million MAGA March too, or was that a different event in November?
No, same thing.
Okay.
We wound up at the same place. We wound up at the Supreme Court. But we were there, like I said, there was a mission for guarding the speakers, the particular speakers, the group of ladies. And then I think one of them was Marshall Lassard from Virginia Freedom Keepers, and I can't recall the other one's names. There were several different ladies. Like I said, we're afraid to go into D.C. without an escort.
What was your next security event after the MAGA March in November?
Was the Atlanta Stop the Steal rally, Alexander's Atlanta Stop the Steal rally.
When was that?
November, I think the 21st, somewhere in there.
Okay.
I think it was like November 20. Well, it was on a Saturday, so it's November 20th or 21st, somewhere in there.
And tell the court about Oath Keepers' involvement in providing security at the Stop the Steal rally.
So we secured the event. Our guys were they were on the steps of the state capitol. It was a permitted event. They had speakers on the steps, and we guarded the speakers. We provided an escort for Ali Alexander when he left the stage. And we also had, in fact, John Shirley was another officer was there again with other retired police officers, and also a Navy SEAL veteran who was there with them. And they did they were out watching the Antifa. Antifa was there, dressed all in black. A lot of them carrying AK-47s about 2 blocks away. But the police did a pretty good job of keeping them away from the Ali Alexander event. And so our guys, our retired law enforcement officers and retired Navy SEAL veteran just kept an eye on them, let us know what they were doing. But we had no incidents. They didn't close on us. Thankfully, we had a peaceful event, and that was it. Escorted Ali Alexander off the stage. He insisted on walking through the crowd, which is not usually what we like to do, but we went ahead and did a wedge formation around him with our hands on each other's shoulders to go through the crowd, which is a PSD, a personal security detail technique. And we escorted him off the stage safely through the crowd while he shook people's hands, and we took him to his limousine. So he's a bit of a prima donna. He had his own limousine pulled up down the street and picked him up.
What was the next event in Washington, D.C. that you provided security for?
That was the December, I believe it was called the Jericho March. The one in December 12th or 14th, somewhere in there.
Okay, and tell the court about that.
In Washington, D.C. Same thing, very similar. I mean, this one was, they were marching all around the Capitol, blowing their shofar, their traditional biblical horn. They also had speakers at the Supreme Court and other venues around the Capitol. That's one thing people don't realize, is there's like little stages all around the Capitol, on the perimeter of the Capitol grounds. And in November and December, there were speeches at multiple stages around the Capitol. And this one, again, was in front of the Supreme Court. And at this one, part of our duty there was to help provide escort for General Flynn, Michael Flynn, who was speaking at the Supreme Court. And so we did security for events for the Jericho March people themselves. They had events, it's almost always a 2-day thing. We'll have events on one day and then events the next day. So we did some events the day prior to Flynn speaking at the Supreme Court. I can't remember the name of the events though. But anyway, so we were there to help escort him, get a PSD detail, personal security detail, to escort him from the Supreme Court to, like, around the Capitol, down towards the mall, to speak at the mall also in December. And then we, of course, guarded the events themselves. We helped with the event on the mall, as well as the one at the Supreme Court. And then afterwards, our guys did the same escort mission we always do, escorting people who need help, like I said, women usually, or disabled veterans, or elderly. Those are the people that are most vulnerable to attack. And we would escort them back to their hotels, to their metro stops.
And after the Jericho March, the next security detail that Oath Keepers participated in or volunteered for?
In Washington, D.C. was January 5th and 6th.
Okay. And before we get to that, let me just ask you briefly about the 3 events that you just described, the Million MAGA March, the Stop the Steal rally, and the Jericho March. About how many Oath Keepers were participants in providing security at the Million MAGA March?
Maybe 20. I'm guessing.
And the Stop the Steal
So,
rally?
yeah, I would say probably, pardon?
Stop the Steal rally?
Oh, indeed, in Atlanta? Let me think. Again, possibly about 20 altogether.
How about the Jericho March?
20 or 30, somewhere in there.
So before we get to the details of what security teams did on January 5th and 6th, why don't you first tell the court how the invitations came to you to provide security for the events on January 5th and 6th?
Objection to the relevance?
Well, from prior,
Hold on, Mr. Rhodes.
the
Mr. Rhodes,
Jericho
hold on.
March people, for example, and Marshall Assad was another one. So on January 5th and
Mr.
6th,
Rhodes,
there
can
was
you hear us?
Virginia Freedom Keepers. Oh, go ahead.
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
So there was an objection. Mr. Dukian?
Just objecting to the relevance, the specifics of how the requests came in. I don't see the relevance to anything.
Mr. Miller?
Well, I mean, it could have already been addressed by now, but I mean, the issue obviously is central to the case. What were the Oath Keepers doing on January 5th and 6th? Were they there to overthrow the government? Were they there to delay the presidential certification? Why did they first come there? It relates to that whole question.
All right, I'll allow the question. So
Okay.
overruled.
So, Mr. Rhodes, if you could answer, do you recall the question that I asked?
Yeah, so on the 5th, it was Virginia Women's for Trump event that our men helped to protect right in front of the Supreme Court. And also, they were providing security at Freedom Plaza. And the third thing they were doing on the 5th was there was a team assigned to Roger Stone, who had requested, he had done, Oath Keepers had provided security for him in Florida prior to that, and so he requested a personal security detail in D.C., and we assigned a team to him. And so on the 5th, they escorted him to Freedom Plaza and other places. They were with him all day. And on the 6th, we were tasked with, one team was still attached to Roger Stone, that same team. But then there was another team, we had two permitted events on Capitol grounds. One was Area 7, which is called Lower Senate Park, about 2 blocks north of the Capitol. That was the Latinos for Trump and Virginia Freedom Keepers event. They had a co-event. That was a permitted event, and we were assigned to protect that event, which we did. And I spoke at that event also on the 6th. And the other event on the 6th was Ali Alexander's Stop the Steal rally on Area 8 of the Capitol grounds, another permitted event. He had secured a permit to use a portion of the Capitol grounds right in front of the Supreme Court in the northeast corner of the Capitol. So those were our events, and then of course the general mission of Oath Keepers to protect Trump supporters who were vulnerable to attack on the streets is the general mission.
So you're aware that 2 groups of Oath Keepers went inside the Capitol building on January 6th?
Yes, I am.
Okay, let's talk about the first group and what you know about them. How many Oath Keepers were part of the first group that went inside the Capitol? Do you know?
Well, that was the Ali Alexander team. Their mission that day was to escort Ali Alexander and his speakers from the Ellipse. They attended the Ellipse rally where the president spoke in the VIP section, and to escort them from there to the second location, the Area 8 rally in front of the Supreme Court at the northeast Capitol, or northeast corner of the Capitol grounds. That was their mission that day. Unfortunately, they went on mission and entered the Capitol on their own, of their own volition. So, sua sponte, they just went in the Capitol.
Do you know why they did?
I called them stupid. I told them it was stupid to do that, and they told me afterwards.
So, so that first group that went in, again, how many people?
14. There was the Florida chapter, and then also a contingent from Ohio. Jessica Watkins came. She brought people from her own local group. She called them the Ohio State Regulars, militia. And she was an eligible member, but she had her own group. She brought her own team with her. And they were taking part in our security operation, which was fine. But then, along with our team leader from Florida, they went inside the Capitol, which was not fun.
And what do you know about why they went inside the Capitol?
Well, the government's star witness was Jason Dolan, an Oath Keeper who had pled, and in his testimony, he testified that it was spontaneous and nothing planned. And no witness in my trial testified to there being any plan, just spontaneous. They just decided to go inside. After they got out, and they finally told me they'd gone inside, I said, that was stupid. And I said, why'd you do that? And they told me they had heard someone had been shot, and they went inside to render medical aid and to assist law enforcement. That's what they told me.
And how about the second group that went in? First of all, how many Oath Keepers were part of that group, if you know?
I think there were 5 with that group, and that was the detail assigned to Roger Stone. And he was going to be the keynote speaker at Holly Alexander's event on Capitol grounds in Area 8. So they're supposed to escort Roger Stone from the ellipse to the Area 8 rally, and he was going to speak. But Roger Stone decided to stay in his hotel and didn't come out again. I think he got upset because he wasn't given enough VIP treatment at the president's rally. And he just, basically just put kibosh on doing anything else that day. And they decided on their own, sua sponte, to go to the Capitol, and they entered the Capitol on their own. I didn't even know about that until a few days later, unfortunately.
And what I want to do at this point is go back to some of the communications that you provided to Oath Keepers. I think you may be aware of kind of the underlying theme of this case, and that is that you somehow directed these groups to go inside the Capitol. And I guess what I'll start with is that question first. Did you have anything to do with those individuals going inside the Capitol, either group?
No, I did not direct them to do so, and I did not know they had done so until afterwards. It was already done.
So part
I
of,
was not. And I told them it was stupid, and I told them it was stupid for 2 reasons. One, it was not our mission that day, and 2, them doing that exposed us to persecution by our political enemies who have taken advantage of that to persecute us. And this is what's happened to me. That's where I'm at. That's why I'm here.
right,
In jail.
And we're going to talk a little bit about that too here in a little bit.
Hold on a second. Hold on, the guard is here. Hold on. What's that? Okay, I gotta get back to my cell. I'm gonna call you, Mr. Miller, if you don't mind. I'm gonna call you on my tablet here in a moment, okay?
That sounds good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
We're just gonna break in place until I call us, just so we're ready to go on. We will go off record though.
gave him my client's number 2 as a backup. Oh, probably because I'm still tied in here and it went over to voicemail. I may have to disconnect from the court, but we'll see if you can get connected. And then we can have it connect to the court.
It's not gonna be easy for you to find the information. We're getting one of your phones through the.
It's mine, and I might as well just disconnect it now because it's not gonna come through mine. I should have hung up before. What, it disconnected?
Yeah, I didn't know what to do.
So my phone still showed conference, Judge, and you can only take 2 calls on the conference line, and I booted it back. And I gave him his number as a backup, just in case that happened, and he just tried to connect and did it. So I'm sure he'll call back.
Our records show you do not have an account or enough funds to complete this call. To pay for just this call using your credit or debit card, please press 1. To decline this call will cost 20 cents per minute, plus any applicable federal, state, and local taxes, plus a one-time transaction fee of $3, plus third-party pass-through fees of 40 cents. You will only be charged the per-minute rate for the amount of time you were on the phone. If you do not want to connect this call, but would like to fund an account to pay for future calls, please hang up and dial 800-844-6591. Or for faster service, you can set up an account at securistest.net or by downloading the Securist mobile app on your smartphone. Our records show you have a card on file ending in 1645. If you would like to reuse the card on file to pay for this call, please press 1. To use a new, please enter your card expiration date by entering the 2-digit month followed by the 2-digit year. You entered 1224. If this is correct, please press 1. If this is not, please enter the 5-digit billing zip code associated with the credit or debit card.
Mr. Miller, it sounds like you're still connected to the court.
The phone is not.
I was still hearing through the speakers what was being entered.
It's from the speakerphone. So I'm gonna next call the court to get reconnected. Hi, Mr. Rhodes, can you hear us? All right, yeah, I've gotta connect you back to the court, so just stand by for a minute.
You have not entered
right, Mr. Rhodes, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
All right, thank you. Mr. Miller, are you okay with going forward with your client outside the courtroom?
I'll have somebody go down. I think he had to use the restroom.
Understood. It's your choice if you want to go forward at the moment. I'm fine with continuing if you want to press on, that's your call.
Yeah, I am a little bit concerned about time and maintaining this connection. So, I think where we broke off were the groups that went inside the Capitol, and it was not at your direction. What I want to back up to now, Mr. Rhodes, are communications, because part of what this case is about is whether or not Oath Keepers had anything to do with the delay of the presidential certification. Let's start first with some public comments that you made, I think as early as November 3rd. Were you concerned about the election integrity of the November 2020 election?
Yes, because I saw across the country city election laws being directly violated. And that triggers Article 2, which states that each state shall appoint such American legislature to direct the number of electors. So I consider that illegal under state law, but also unconstitutional because it violates Article 2 for executive branch officials, such as election officials, or judges, to change the rules for selecting electors. I consider that illegal and unconstitutional. And I also believe it facilitates fraud by having mass drop boxes that are unsecured and also mass mail-in ballots. And there's a reason why you have election laws that require signatures and have other requirements to prevent fraud. And all of those are being set aside using COVID as the reason, the rationale. So yes, I was very concerned.
So with respect to the communication, the written communication that you gave members of Oath Keepers, both by emails and also posting on the Oath Keepers website, did you have as an objective the delay of presidential certification on January 6th?
No. In fact, multiple times I referred to the certification as I expected it to happen. I said that in open letters to President Trump, and I basically said I expect this to happen. And I was trying to encourage him to invoke the Insurrection Act, and in particular to do a mass declassification data dump to expose fraud, criminality, and corruption in our government as a way to put pressure on the Supreme Court to do it. So the Supreme Court declined to hear the case from Texas against Pennsylvania on that central election and whether state laws could be modified or ignored by the judiciary or the executive branch in the state. The Supreme Court, fortunately, even under their original jurisdiction, they declined to hear the case, and only Thomas and Alito dissented and said, hey, we don't have discretion in the trial court. This is our original jurisdiction. So the Supreme Court did that. I think it proves in the constitutional crisis. And what I was hoping that President Trump would do is, like I said, do a declassification and data dump to expose corruption in our government on both sides, Democrat and Republican. And as a way of correcting the situation and bringing attention to the criminality in our government and putting pressure on the representatives and the courts to do their job. But no, it's never that anyone disrupt Congress that leads the power. Their Congress pointed to, but the president should have done what he could do to the visibility of commander-in-chief and the chief executive.
Your Honor, I'm just gonna, are we getting a record? I'm having a hard time hearing.
We're picking up, Mr. Rhodes, are you using a speakerphone or are you talking into a handset?
I'm on my tablet in my cell, and it's a little, it's an echo chamber. I'm in a concrete cell.
All right.
So the best I can do, unfortunately.
It might be helpful if you just, it's counterintuitive, but if you talked a little softer, it might actually help with the feedback that we're getting.
Okay, is this better now?
That's just a little bit better. It just cuts down on that echoing.
Okay, oh, there you go, right. Well, how about now?
That's even better. So just if you could just keep it kind of at that level, it would make our connection on dissent better.
Okay, Mr. Rhodes, with respect to that, you issued an open letter to President Trump. It's part of the exhibit in this case. It has an exhibit number 19 that you don't have in front of you. But do you recall writing an open letter to President Trump, Part 2, Act Now, dated December 23rd of 2020? Mr. Rhodes?
Can you tell if the connection's still open?
It shows it active. Hello? I'm gonna disconnect so that he can call this phone back. His attorney is checking to find out what's going on. Do we want to take a brief break to Twomey? The problem is, once he gets on,
Yes.
then we may have 15 minutes and lose him again. So I can tell you, I've talked to him a couple of times before this hearing, and it does break up about every 15 minutes or so.
Okay. As far as just timing-wise, about how much time do you think you have left of what you want to talk to him about?
Well, I just want to go through, I'm sure that opposing counsel is going to go through the words of these statements. I just kind of want to get his general overview of them, and whether or not he believes that those statements are motivations to any oath keepers to interfere with the certification and thereby delay it. And then just a couple of concluding, and then turn the witness over to opposing counsel. I don't know if he intends to take as much time. I mean, traditionally cross-examination is less time than direct.
I've seen it go both ways, so. He gets a fair chance to cross-examine, but I just want to know how much time we have left with you, because I want to make good use of our afternoon as well.
Understood.
And if he's available a similar time tomorrow, perhaps to go through his attorney again.
I've inquired.
Okay.
That's already there.
It's helpful to just have that information so that we know, because the record was better when he was talking through his attorney, and we do need to give fair time for cross-examination.
And there is, I got an email just a little bit ago from opposing counsel of the trial transcript from Stewart Rhodes. And again, I mean, I think that's fair game as to direct impeachment on this testimony. And it might be helpful for us after I'm done, if we in fact have a break, for opposing counsel to provide notice to us of what provisions are going to be used for impeachment, rather than just having the scattergun approach using the transcript to inquire into any particular area. So I'd request that the court do that to help expedite perhaps the examination tomorrow if in fact it gets delayed.
We can address that when we get to it, but at this point I'm not going to tell the plaintiff they have to tell you what they're going to impeach him on at this point, so. But, you know, it's, as you're right, it's fair game for impeachment to, you know, prior statements of his, as long as it's within the scope of the direct.
Understood.
So are we taking the break or are we?
Let's see if we can get a quick answer as to.
There it is.
Okay.
An incarcerated individual at Alexandria Detention Center. Our records show you do not have an account or enough funds to complete this call. To pay for just this call using your credit or debit card, please press 1. To decline. Hi, Mr. Rhodes, can you hear me? All right, I've got to conference you into the court again. Give me just a minute. Okay, we should be on.
Mr. Rhodes, can you hear us?
The clerk has to join us first.
Mr. Rhodes, are you there?
Yes, I am.
All right, thank you. Mr. Miller?
Okay, so Mr. Rhodes, we were asking before we got cut off about communications between you and Oath Keepers by way of emails or website postings. And the question related to beginning in November, did you encourage Oath Keepers by any of these communications to delay the presidential certification?
No, my focus was on President Trump. He was my principal audience, and to use his powers as president, as the chief executive and commander-in-chief, and in particular due to classification and data dump. Nothing about interrupting Congress. I believe in separation of powers. What Congress do what we're going to do. And I had a section in my December 23rd letter entitled Post to Anywhere Space, anticipating that Congress would certify what I consider to be unconstitutional slates. I still expected to advise the president to still do a declassification of data to expose corruption in our government.
And I know this is difficult, Mr. Rhodes, but if you could try to speak a little bit softer so that we can control the echo a little bit better and we can make a record of this. I'm catching most of that, but the echo is still a problem, and I know it's difficult given where you're at.
All right.
How
about now? Is this better?
Much better, yes, thank you. With respect to the call to action, because there was an email that was sent January 4th, it's Exhibit 14 in the documents before the court. Do you remember sending an email to Oath Keepers members entitled Call to Action, Oath Keepers deploying to DC to protect events, speakers, and attendees on January 5-6 time to stand?
Yes, I did. And I have that in front of me right here. I can see it.
Oh, you actually do have that email, okay. And,
I've got a copy of it.
okay, and was that an exhibit in your court case, in your criminal court case?
Yes, it was.
And there has been some discussion about the Insurrection Act, and you just mentioned that, and your testimony as to whether or not you intended the Insurrection Act to be a means by which the certification of the election was delayed. Was that ever your intent by statement or otherwise?
No, absolutely not. Like I said, my focus was on getting President Trump, in particular, to invoke the Insurrection Act, to seize data, and to seize evidence that knew nothing about U.S. politics.
And even after January 6th, were you still encouraging President Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act to obtain data related to the election in November 2020?
Yes, I would.
And with respect to the call to action on January 4th, was there any specific request that Oath Keepers do anything to delay the presidential certification?
No, not at all. Just do.
Did you later issue 2 additional calls to action or messages to Oath Keepers after January 6th?
Yes, the January 14th was the Oath Keepers Warning Order Part 1, and in that I also repeated my appeal to President Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act and do a declassification of data done.
So, and by the way, Judge, this is Exhibit 43 in our file. So it looks like there are 2 parts of this this posting that is marked as Exhibit 43 before our court, entitled Critical Message for Oath Keepers and Patriots, Part 1. One, it appears that you're speaking to the members of Oath Keepers, and then first, it looks like you're speaking to President Trump, and then second, you're speaking to 4 patriots. I guess that's about halfway down. Are there basically 2 recipients that you intended by this particular posting on January 14th?
Is this the one entitled Oath Keepers Warning Order Part 1?
Well, it starts with, and it may be, the document was provided by Plaintiffs' Counsel. It starts with, as always, Oath Keepers stands in defense of the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Okay, so this is a 2-part email. Is that right? Okay. First part, President Trump. Second part, Patriots.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
And did you in any portion of this particular posting or message to Oath Keepers and President Trump encourage any type of violence or action against government?
No, not at all. In fact, I told them to stay away from their state capitals so that they would not be caught up in false flags or tour traps.
And in this particular posting to both President Trump and Patriots, were you also encouraging President Trump to continue to try to obtain classified information relating not just to the election, but to anybody that was undermining the Constitution.
That's correct. And not just election fraud, but also anyone who was either bribed or blackmailed by foreign entities or who was otherwise corrupt or engaging in illegal activities.
And then was there a second message that you gave in January to Oath Keepers by posting on your website?
I issued one more. Trump must declassify all the dirty secrets and crimes now.
And what was the date of
January
that?
16th, that was mailed out.
Okay, Judge, that is
I
marked.
believe it was mailed out in January.
Okay, hold on just a second. That was marked as
That's right.
Exhibit Alpha Romeo AR. You should have a copy before you, a courtesy copy, and the original is in the binder. Do you have that, Judge, or do I need to get that to you?
Don't know if I have a copy of that one.
Here, I got a screw copy, Judge. And what, Mr. Rhodes, were you communicating in that particular communication to Oath Keepers on January 16th?
Focused entirely on the president using his authority to declassify documents. That was the entire focus of that.
And was there any application in this particular communication to overthrow the government?
No, of course not. Quite the contrary, to enforce the Constitution and preserve the government.
And were you still even at that point on the 16th, just a little over a week before the inauguration, asking President Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act?
No, at that point I did not do that, but I did encourage him to still do a declassification of data.
And with respect to I want to back up just a little bit because there's been a lot of communication for several months leading up until January 6th regarding the Insurrection Act. What is your understanding of the Insurrection Act and how it may or could have related to Oath Keepers?
In November, my primary concern when it comes to Oath Keepers was the danger of the White House being attacked. And I think it was in August of 2020, during the summer, that there had been rioting and violence outside the White House so severe that the Secret Service had evacuated the president into the bunker under the White House. And there were quite a few Secret Service agents who were injured, and Metro PD officers also. And they attempted to burn down St. John's Church. And so that happened in the summer. And then leading up to the election, and then really after the election, there were multiple Antifa websites threatening to raise siege to the White House if Trump did not concede immediately. And they threatened to drag him out by the hair. And so there were threats to the White House. My concern was that it was being stand down orders given across the country, Minneapolis, Portland, Seattle, where police stations were overrun and being done to the ground, and the police being ordered by the political leadership to stand on and not stop the arson and the rioting. My concern was that the White House would be vulnerable to a stand down order being given at D.C. to abandon the White House. And so we were prepared, if the president invoked the Insurrection Act, only under those conditions would we be available to follow his orders to protect the White House. And that was it.
Okay, let me.
And that was articulated in the November 10th call to action, where I specifically said,
All right, Mr. Rhodes, hold on one second.
I
Let's.
was concerned about
You're just breaking up a little bit. It's good that you're talking slow. That's helpful. To the extent you can, just try and keep it at a pace like that. And then Also, we have, I just want to make sure that you're still on the question that Mr. Miller asked you here.
Right, and
Yeah,
so,
so,
No, hold on, Mr. Rhodes, let's let Mr. Miller ask you.
yeah, let me just kind of guide you just a little bit, not necessarily with a leading question, but to give you the contours of this. So really the question is how that Insurrection Act relates to the Oath Keepers, your organization, and what you saw the Oath Keepers' role. In fact, if President Trump were to invoke that act.
well, under the Insurrection Act, the president, at his discretion, can determine that the insurrection is in effect and the civil rights of the American people are not being secured. And he can, at that point, use the military and also the militia. And the militia is defined by federal statute as the organized militia, which is the National Guard, Naval Reserves, and then the unorganized militia, which is all able-bodied males between ages 17 and 45. And then it's my understanding that veterans get training experience can also be called up until age 65. But the second part of your question, my concern was this is something I said in call to action. I said that Oath Keepers also have some of our most skilled special warfare veterans standing by armed just outside D.C. and an emergency QRF in the event of a worst case scenario in D.C., such as a Benghazi-style assault on the White House by communist terrorists, in conjunction with stand-down orders by traitor generals. And then I said, our men will stand by awaiting the president's orders to call us as the militia, which would override D.C. to take down laws. So that's what I was referring to in November 10th, call to action.
So there's been much ado made about some words that you've used in your communications, including the words bloody civil war, and the prediction that that could come. Did that have anything to do with the Insurrection Act or the invocation of the Insurrection Act?
Well, it's my opinion that the left was engaged in open insurrection throughout the summer of 2020. You had multiple instances of leftists taking over entire city blocks in Seattle and Portland, and left the Jazz in Portland, the shop in Seattle, declaring them to be autonomous zones, and even putting signs when you know the valley of the United States and entering the Southern Territory as the Jazz or the shop, and then patrolling that border with AK-47s in their hands. So you have multiple instances, and I consider that to be obvious insurrection and a seditious conspiracy. So what was going on across the country? And at the time, I thought that it should absolutely invoke the Insurrection Act. But then I also, in reaction to what I saw happening at the election, I think you should have used it again. But as I said, focus on collecting evidence and exposing wrongdoing, not on use of force. But I did anticipate that if you did that, or if you continued rioting and armed insurrection by the left, and so what I said in my multiple statements to the president, that we stand by and veterans ready and willing to assist in keeping the peace across the country while he gathered the evidence of wrongdoing. Nothing about Congress, nothing about using force against any other branch of government, just keeping the peace while he used his authority as commander-in-chief to gather evidence to special prosecutors and to do the prosecution of that.
So, Mr. Rhodes, I want to make sure that I give enough time to plaintiff to examine you, but I want to ask you about the convictions that resulted from January 6th. You were recently tried and convicted in the federal court in Washington, D.C. What were you found guilty of? And I'm not asking you to explain as to why or your speculation as to what the jury thought or didn't thought, but what were you convicted of? What were you not convicted of?
So I was found guilty of count one, this is conspiracy to oppose by force the authority of the U.S. government, found not guilty of count 2, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, found guilty of obstruction of official proceeding, that's the count 3, found not guilty of conspiracy to prevent Congress from discharging its duties, and then also found guilty of obstructing documents. So that's what it was. I was found guilty of and not guilty of.
And the destruction of documents had to do with deletion of emails?
Actually, they accused me of instructing others to delete chat or messages.
So with respect to those chats, let me just touch briefly on those. According to testimony that we've heard so far before this court, this was a closed signal chat group consisting of a few members of the Oath Keepers that were present in Washington, D.C. Did you invite the general membership of Oath Keepers to participate in that chat group?
Well, we had multiple chats. We had an operational chat for January 6th in D.C. We had a chat for all of the speakers and the event organizers to talk to us. And then we also had a general membership chat.
Mr. Rhodes, unfortunately, we lost you on the, can you hear me, sir? This is the judge. Unfortunately, I heard you right up until the point where you were talking about the operational chat, and then after that point, I just couldn't understand the words that you were using to describe there. Could you start over after the operational chat, please?
Yes. So we had another chat that was for the rally organizers. We call it the chat. So the rally organizers, like Howard Alexander or John Guandolo from the field of Trump, anybody who's organizing a rally to talk to our leadership. So there was that one. And we had another chat with intelligence gathering about what's going on in D.C. about the Antifa student, for example. And we had a general chat by membership, and then there were chats by each state group. So Florida, which is Kelly Knight's group, one of the groups that went into D.C. had Florida chat. And today, we also had a proposed D.C. operations chat that they were on, which I was not on, which was against our rules, actually. And then there was Jessica Watkins, who was on a Zealot chat with other people, again, on the Lynch committee. So there were some chats that I was just not on. I was not on, and not any of my leadership from the January 6th.
And with respect to the conspiracy to obstruct, the conspiracy to obstruct Congress, those two charges you were found out not guilty of. Well, let's strike that question. Let me just ask this point blank. Did the government ever accuse you of either you yourself attempting to overthrow government or conspiring with others to overthrow government?
Well, they accused me of a lot of things, but I'm not sure what you're asking me.
I'm just asking you whether or not the government charged you with conspiring to overthrow government.
Well, they charged me with the conspiracy to oppose by force the authority of the U.S. So there's different prongs of the seditious conspiracy statute. And yet there are prongs that it did not. Like one was conspiracy to overthrow, put down, and destroy by force the government of the United States. So the answer to that question is no. It's not charging with that. Or to let the war against the United States. Not charging with that. It's charging to by force, to oppose by force the authority thereof. That's what they're charging with. Or by force to prevent or delay execution of any law in the United States. Those are the two charges against me. Oppose by force the authority thereof, by force to prevent or delay.
And with respect to the convictions that you received, did you ever, or did the government prove that you ever stepped foot inside the Capitol?
No, I did not enter the Capitol, nor did I instruct anyone else to. And like I said, I thought all the witnesses said there was no plan, but unfortunately, the court instructed the jury that they inferred an implied plan using my free speech as evidence of the implied plan. That's what happened. So basically, I was convicted for my free speech.
And specifically, what speech are you referring to?
Oh, everything. I mean, just
Felony convictions, right?
yes.
And I guess the convictions aren't actually entered until sentencing, but what is your plan with respect to leadership of Oath Keepers? Do you plan to stay as leader of Oath Keepers, or are you planning to do something else with your leadership?
Well, I've been, because I've been in solitary confinement now for over a month, I've been incapacitated anyway. And so my vice president, retired Army Colonel John Siemens, has been the acting president of Oath Keepers. Like I said, like you said, so I'm going to go through the appellate process. Only if I'm unsuccessful on appeal would I be triggered under my laws and I'll be ineligible to be a member of Oath Keepers. I'm not made my.
Do we still have you, Mr. Rhodes? I think we're back to that 15-minute mark, Judge, so we'll get time one more time. Do we want to take a break while I do that, or?
Does anyone need a break?
I think we probably ought to run through if we can.
I would agree, but if anyone needs one, I understand.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect because I think we lost him again at that point.
Are we on record, Your Honor?
We're off record.
To be clear, we're still live on the live stream, we're just off the record, so cover the mic.
She walked out. That just tells you where my day started and your day started. It was a priority. Exactly.
He's two. Oh, two.
Okay. Mr. Rhodes? Yeah, I'm sorry it took so long. The card that we used initially got declined, so hold on, I'm gonna join you in the board. So stand by, yeah, stand by. I think it was a fraud order. And Madam Clerk, we should be in the way.
We should be in the way.
Mr. Rhodes, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
All right, Mr. Miller?
Okay, so we got cut off when we were talking about the question as to whether or not you would resign pending outcome of appeal. So in the event that your appeal is not granted and the conviction stands, what is your intent regarding leadership in the group?
Well, if my appeal is not successful, then obviously I would not be able to remain a member of Oath Keepers under the bylaws. So at that time, I would, of course, resign.
And
But like I said, I may go ahead and just suspend my membership or retire before I'm kind of going to get out.
okay, so you consider currently your leadership to be in suspense or suspended, is that right?
Objection leading.
Well, it's been solitary confinement for 11 months, as I said, and so I've been incapacitated and unable to lead the organization. And so during that time, my vice president, Colonel Eastman, has taken the responsibility of being an acting president of Oath Keepers. And so he would continue to accept that right now.
All right, can you hold on one second, Mr. Rhodes? I understand the objection, Mr. Dedukian, but I understood the question more as clarification, and then I let the witness finish answering because of the delays. And so I think that answers the issue, so. Mr. Miller?
Sure. And Mr. Rhodes, I just have one or two more questions before we're done. One of the things I wanted to ask, there was one of the writings that has been submitted to the court, one of your action letters, you said that if the Insurrection Act wasn't invoked, or if certain things didn't happen, there would be a bloody civil war. Is that your current perspective, that if in fact the Insurrection Act or something like that happens, if it doesn't happen, there will be a bloody civil war? In other words, I'm asking for your current
perception. Trump's no longer the president. I'm not looking at Biden. I'm not going to ask Biden to invoke the Insurrection Act. I don't think that he would be good.
Right, and
I'm not quite sure I understand your question. That should still on January 20th. President Trump, after that point, was no longer the president of the United States. He couldn't do anything anymore.
right, and this goes to the way that the clause in the Alaska Constitution is written, and whether or not it captures past or present actions, but that's really for the court and the parties to discuss. But I just needed that for the record. That's your current perspective. So let me ask you this. With respect to the conviction.
Well, my current perspective is that we're in a very dangerous position in this country, especially because of what's happening regarding the First Amendment. The left declared that Trump was illegitimate, a Russian puppet, that the Russians had interfered, and Hillary Clinton repeatedly called him, condemned him as illegitimate, and the left in the entire administration continued to call it illegitimate and yet none of them were in prison for their free speech like I am, and none of them were driven out of office either, by the way. So I think that we're in very dangerous territory, and it's getting worse, not better.
Mr. Miller?
Why do you believe that the government is pushing against groups like Oath Keepers?
Objection calls for speculation.
I think he's had plenty of time to think about it and consider things. I mean, do you have a basis to answer that question, Mr. Rhodes? I guess that's the first question.
Oh, yes, of course.
And what is that basis for answering that question?
I think it's the temptation of power that, unfortunately, the political left in this country has demonstrated an antipathy, hostility towards free speech, and have no problem, whether it's violence in the streets or canceling people on social media. And now we know the FBI was involved in much of that also, or prosecuting people like myself for political speech. I think that this is, like I said, a very dangerous trend, displaying contempt for free speech and desire to censor and silence political dissidents. And they're only proving incorrect. Every time they do this and ratchet up their activities, it only shows that I was actually correct in my concerns.
I'll pass the witness. Thank you, Mr. Rhodes.
Before we get started here, do we have the answer to whether he's available tomorrow at a similar phone call?
I don't have an answer to that, Judge.
If it would be
Yes,
possible.
Judge, I am.
Well, let the witness answer, I guess.
Mr. Rhodes, would you be available tomorrow
Yeah.
to essentially call your attorney like the system we had earlier?
Yes, Your Honor. Tomorrow my break, where I could use the real attorney phone, is from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. From 1 to 3, I'm like a 2-hour block when I could have uninterrupted attorney-client phone call.
And for what it's worth, if you would be available at that time, I think that would be better for cross-examination because our record is a little bit spotty. I've heard most of what you've said, but every once in a while it just gets a little hard. And so if we could delay cross-examination to tomorrow at that time, I think it would be better for everybody.
Yes, Your Honor, we agree with that.
Do we not want to try to use the time that we have, Judge, with the connection that we have?
I'm just concerned about the level of answers that we're getting. You're in the same position I was last week when I was telling you about bird in the hand, so I appreciate the flip in the situation there. But I'm also concerned about the audio that we're getting, and I'm hearing from Madam Clerk that it's tough, and so I want to make sure that we have an opportunity for both sides. We've crossed, and if there's a redirect, that it's a better record.
So 9 o'clock our time for about an hour potentially, and Mr. Rhodes, I'll coordinate with your attorney on that.
And an hour should be plenty.
Sounds great. I'll be ready to go at 1 p.m. Eastern. Like I said, I'll have a 2-hour block.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rhodes, appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. You may be excused.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, Judge, if we could take a break.
Yes. Yeah, we're going for about 2 hours. Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate everyone's work for getting through the testimony there. We can stand at recess. We'll come back at 3:15.
All right, you guys have all heard it live here. They will be back at 3:15 this afternoon. They're going to take a break, kind of had an unofficial break here just a second ago. I took advantage of that. Walked in just shortly after they began to get him back up onto the testimony once again. Thank you guys all for being here today. It has been a beautiful, wonderful, absolutely positive day today, other than waking up to frigid code of negative 33 degrees in my location. I'm hearing reports as cold as almost 40 below out towards Willow and Talkeetna this morning. So it just really depended on where you were. When I made it into Wasilla, they were at a balmy negative 25. I think that's the coldest I've seen there so far too. So it's been one of those days today. please like, share this video. It is your support. It is folks like you that have made sure that this broadcast is reaching as many Alaskans as possible. You have been hearing testimony today from Stewart Rhodes, the founder of the Oath Keepers, and he will be back tomorrow. And from what it's sounding like, it's going to be tomorrow morning starting at 1 o'clock. And he should be on a better connection, a better line. I am not sure what is going on with my microphones today. I cannot get my external microphones to connect. Every time I do, all I get is solid static coming out of them. I did a small test broadcast when I was not running earlier today, and it had absolutely no static whatsoever. Replugged it back in after the break for lunch and retried to do it again, back to static. So there's something inside of this building that has to be knocking it out, and I'll verify that tonight when I'm doing the Alaska School of Government. So at 7 p.m. tonight, if you are in the area, the Palmer-Wasilla area, at the Alaska School of Government, it is at Real Life Church, begins at 7 o'clock. And you will get to hear from David Eastman. He will be back here tonight at 7 o'clock to give an update on the case proceedings where it stands at right now. And you guys are more than welcome to come and participate in that event in real life by showing up. Again, that's at 7 p.m. at the Real Life Church in Palmer, Alaska. If you're not able to attend, lo and behold, I will be there live streaming that one there too tonight. And like I said, I will be able to rerun my microphone system there tonight. And I'll bet my bottom dollar I'll have absolutely no problem connecting the microphones in. I won't have no static issues. I won't have no interference whatsoever created while I am there. But there's got to be something in this courthouse that is knocking that system out. Once I get my website back up and running, I hope it's really, really soon. I really do need your support. Your support is what made this possible today, this broadcast possible. The software needed to be able to multicast on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, on both Politadick and Politadick Unfiltered. This will also be recasted again on Rumble here within the next few hours. The first half of this broadcast has probably already started to transfer over there, so you can always catch that there. Help us be able to live stream there directly. If you don't have a Rumble account, it takes a second to sign up for Rumble. You don't even have to go there. All I need you to do is just subscribe to Politadick there. Just become a subscriber so that we can reach 100 people, so that we can stream live there. We just need another channel that we can be put onto that is uncensored, that we don't have to worry about our videos being taken down, like today's testimony being given all throughout today. YouTube may throw up a violation or a flag against it because it might go against their community policies for one reason or another, just for the fact that we have Stewart Rhodes giving testimony on the stand today. That's all it takes to violate policies of the mainstream media like YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, or used to be Twitter, whatever you may want to look at it in those regards. So take a moment, please like and share this video. They will be re-beginning here in just a little while. Let me look at the time here. We got about 7 minutes or so, and they will be coming back here into the courtroom to continue on with this case. Again, Stewart Rhodes will continue his testimony tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Been very interesting listening to what questioning has been going on. We had David Eastman on the stand earlier there, and was given some cross-examination by the prosecution and also by the defense, and the questions that came out in regards to that. It's very clear the narrative that is being spun here. They want everybody to be accountable for the actions of the few. For those 1,000 people that entered into the Capitol that day, the 3% of them that happen to belong to the Oath Keepers, and they want to blame that on all 1 million people that showed up there approximately at the Capitol that day on January 6th. There was 1 million people there, and they want to let the actions of 1,000 individuals, bad apples, people that did what they never should have done, whether you are a Democrat or Republican, everybody, no matter what party you belong to, we all condemn the acts that happened that day inside of the Capitol. But that is not the problem of the other million people, approximately, that were sitting outside that day that had absolutely nothing to do with what happened. And David Eastman happens to be one of those people. One of the witnesses earlier today was Patrick Martin. He also gave his accountability of what happened that day at the Capitol. He was there with David Eastman. They were together at the event, and neither one of them entered the Capitol. Neither one of them acknowledged in totality of what was going on, more of what they were hearing going on with the crowd. Everybody that has given testimony in regards that has been there says the environment was festive, fun, exciting. It was an honor to be there. It was I'm sure the feeling was very similar for me in regards to what they were feeling when President Trump came here to Alaska, and I was able to go to the university and participate in that event with over 5,000 plus Alaskans. I mean, to me, that was huge. I live in Alaska. 5,000 Alaskans plus, all there to see one person, and at that time it was President Trump, and he was speaking there at the university, and it was a beautiful event to be a part of. It was fun. It was festive. The YMCA song was playing there too, just like you were hearing in a couple of the streams that they were giving out here earlier today with some of the cuts. And hopefully we'll be able to get the clear picture of those short videos that they had played here. We'll be able to get links onto the first broadcast so that you can be able to replay them without the stuttering and sputtering of the Zoom broadcast that they were providing to us earlier today. Again, they're going to be coming back here in about 5 more minutes. So please like and share this video. I'm going to stop talking so that you guys can all live in a little bit of peace and quiet here at this moment in time. Again, I still don't know why my microphones don't want to connect up without static, but I have tried 4 times today, and each time has had the exact same results. And the 5th time that I have tried today was when I was not live here, but I did go live on my own personal channel privately, and not a bit of static. I had absolutely no problem, but that was when there was nothing going on in the courtroom like there is right now. But as soon as the activity in the courtroom started again, all of a sudden, all of my frequencies went right out the window, and it could take someone's just Bluetooth being connected real close that walks into the room. So again, thank you guys all for being here today. Please like and share this video. They're going to be restarting here in about 4 minutes or so. Appreciate you guys. And again, like and share. That's how we keep people informed. That's how we beat mainstream media and the Facebook fact checkers and all those that don't want you to see this video happening live, uncensored, unfiltered, uncut at Politadick. They don't even have their normal little splash screen saying they'll be right back up there on Zoom. So you guys just get to look at an empty courtroom for a few minutes.
Which number is that?
For today, this is number 2.
Okay.
For the coffee, this is actually number 2.
Yeah, don't go too far beyond 2 on the energy drinks.
I'll probably be on 4 or 5 before the day is through.
Yikes. How old are you?
Old enough to know better. About 10 years beyond supposedly drinking these in the first place.
Oh, is there an age limit? I better watch out for that.
Well, they kind of suggest anybody that might have heart problems or something like that. It's recommended not to drink these kind of drinks, steer away from lots of coffee.
I'm pretty sure that everything that has caffeine in it is good for you. At least that makes me feel better.
Yes. Well, see, I get to blame my kids for this. She started loving these Monster energy drinks, and every day she's bringing home a completely different flavor.
And they're getting a lot better at that too, by the way. The old ones I couldn't stand, but the new ones, the green ones are great.
That's the whole key. Each time she brought a different flavor, I got the taste test till I finally found what I liked.
Ideas.
Oh, that's true. Who's that? Yeah, no, that's actually.
Did you see the end of that Raiders and New England game? Yeah.
Well, no,
Belichick
it's
probably
two
had an
hours.
aneurysm.
Try this one last time for today. Come on, microphone, connect in without that static for once. Alright, success like last time. Let's see if it lasts or if it comes back.
Total 5 years.
Is A, D is brought on, A, G is engulfed. Okay.
They've been identified, but they've not been moved in.
Okay.
Please rise. Superior Court, please take the last meeting.
Please be seated. Now we're back on record with the parties present in the courtroom. Should we continue with Representative Eastman's testimony?
We will, Judge, and I would like to move the admission of AR, Alpha Romeo.
The 116 email. Mr. Dugan, any objection?
No objection.
So AR is admitted. And it looks like Ms. Harrison is saying it's hard to hear us.
And I can't hear her.
Ms. Harrison, can you hear us? Ms. Harrison, are you able to hear us now?
Just a second.
Seven participants in the meeting.
Let's give it a shot.
All right, Ms. Harrison, are you able to hear us now? Mr. Flynn, are you still listening in?
Yes, hello, Your Honor. Lael is trying to check her speakers. I'll ask her to call back in right now.
It sounds like the problem was on our end with the drop on the connection, so.
Okay, I'll tell her to get right on it. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right, well, we wait for Ms. Harrison to rejoin. She should be coming in shortly. Otherwise, are the parties ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Judge.
And if I'm correct, you had passed the witness for cross-examination, or did you have more questions?
No, I have more.
Okay. Oh, that's right, you were moving into another subject matter, that's what the transition is.
Right.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Tom Flynn again. Can the clerk let Ms. Harrison in? That looks like it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Ms. Harrison, glad we got you back. It was a connection issue on our end, so thank you for pointing that out.
Great. I can hear you now. Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Eastman, if you're ready to return to the witness stand. Okay, Mr. Miller, you may inquire.
Okay, Representative Eastman, I want to talk to you just a little bit more about your background. Have you ever been arrested?
No,
Have you ever been charged with any crime?
no,
You've heard a lot of testimony in this case regarding Oath Keepers and whether or not they're an organization that advocates by force or violence to overthrow the government. From your perspective and in your experience, does the Oath Keepers promote violence?
no, it's the exact opposite.
How that?
I think the whole concept for why Oath Keepers was founded is to prevent violence. And one of the questions that was asked of the previous witness dealt with why was it founded. It was founded dealing with issues like you find in the 10 orders that will not be obeyed. That was at the beginning of the founding of Oath Keepers. And when you have those who take notes of the Constitution and don't follow that, that's when you have things like war crimes. And that's when you have things like violations of rights to privacy, violations of any aspect of the Constitution. And by having good men and women in place and fidelity to their oaths, then the rights of the people will not be violated. You won't have situations like what happened in Katrina or following the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. And you won't have situations like have happened in other countries. One of the stories from Oath Keepers that stood out most to me as a member was the testimony of a Oath Keeper from Texas who served as lieutenant colonel in the East German military. And he was interviewed by Stewart Rhodes, and they shared the interview with the membership and posted it online. And he talked about in East Germany.
Objection, hearsay if it's being offered for the truth.
It's not being offered for the truth. It's being offered for the reason that he's still with Oath Keepers and what he perceives about the organization.
For that purpose, the testimony can continue.
All right, go ahead.
And it stood out to me, I think it's probably the only thing from Oath Keepers that I may have shared on social media. I know I don't do that often, but that interview was especially noteworthy because it was Gunther Spence. He was lieutenant colonel in East Germany, and he talked about what happened when the Berlin Wall fell and why that wasn't a violent event and why it would happen peacefully. It happened peacefully because he and others in the East German military decided that they were not going to follow the unconstitutional orders that came down from the Communist Party. And they were ordered to intervene and to stop the public uprising, and the military in that case decided they were not going to. And without the support of the military behind them, the secret police backed off, and the people themselves tore down the Berlin Wall. Unlike what happened in East Germany previously to that, there were a number of military officers who did honor the East German Constitution, which prevented them from being used aggressively and offensively. The military in East Germany, by Constitution, was only to be used for the defense of the East German people. I think they were ordered into Czechoslovakia to put down the uprising there, and they refused to do so. And unfortunately, the Communist Party was very strong at the time, and those who did attempt to honor their oaths were disappeared. Fortunately, in 1989, that was not the case, and when the military simply stood down, the people were able to accomplish what they were trying to do with taking down the Berlin Wall.
So this again lends itself to the importance for you of taking an oath and keeping the oath and being part of a group like Oath Keepers.
Absolutely, and I'm very glad to have heard of stories like that and encourage them to be shared so that you have people in our military, law enforcement, in all aspects of our government who understand the significance not just of someone else following their oath, but of them personally following their oath and maintaining that fidelity.
What has the impact of Oath Keepers been on Alaska, or do you know?
You know, they don't really have an active presence in Alaska, so I don't know that there's been much of an impact. I know, I mean, personally, I know a friend here in Palmer, a veteran from during Vietnam, Gulf War, was rescued by the Oath Keepers when he was in Portland.
Objection, foundation.
Mr. Miller?
Again, it's the same response, Judge. It informs him about Oath Keepers, why he's still a member, why he still has a positive perspective of it, what they do.
To the extent that that's the purpose, he can testify to the general aspects of it, but the specific details would be hearsay and not particularly helpful. So it's helpful to hear the testimony, but with that caveat that it needs to be limited to what his understanding is.
What do you know generally about it?
Yes, well, like I said, I don't know that Oath Keepers has done a lot for Alaska specifically, but I know it did a lot for my friend here in Palmer, who was rescued by Oath Keepers when the police were clashing with Antifa in Portland. He was down there on a personal visit and accidentally found himself, in the middle of that. And he testified to me and to another group here in Palmer that he wasn't a member of Oath Keepers, but he was very glad that they rescued him. So I'm glad that my friend was rescued. That there was another incident where the police were standing shoulder to shoulder with Oath Keepers against those who were perpetrating violence. And so that's the impression that I have of the organization, because that's maybe one of the only people that I know personally who's had some sort of presence at an Oath Keeper event and told me about it personally.
So you heard the testimony of Stewart Rhodes regarding the humanitarian efforts and security efforts of Oath Keepers. Were you aware of that level of activity of Oath Keepers throughout the United States with respect to those type of missions?
Only very generally. I don't read all the emails that they send out over the years. It's been a lot of years. I've heard of some cases, and I'm glad for those, but I couldn't tell you about the specifics there. Just general impression that I know that they work hard to help people in times of need when they can.
So one of the things that you testified about earlier that we skipped over with just brief testimony was the work that you did with the Capitol Police, I believe, when you were in the military police, in the military, and that was when you were stationed in Washington, D.C. Could you tell the court a little bit more about your interaction with the Capitol Police, what that entailed?
My interaction with Capitol Police has always been positive. Every time I visited the Capitol, or we were in meetings together planning the inauguration, and when we were doing the actual carrying out of it, a lot of interaction there. I've never interacted with anyone in the Capitol Police that wasn't professional, that wasn't doing what I thought was a good job, and was glad to interact with them and work together on the inauguration. That said, those are my personal experiences. I know that's back in 2008, 2009. A lot's happened since then. I think under current leadership in Congress, it's really gone downhill. It's a much more politicized department than it was when I knew the people who were involved.
What do you mean by that?
When I am hearing accounts of Republican congressmen talking about the Capitol Police, secretly coming into their offices and conducting...
Objection to foundation and relevance.
What's the relevance of the testimony?
Well, Judge, a lot of the testimony that we've heard from the experts from Plaintiff relies on accounts or information that came from Capitol Police. I mean, granted, there are a number of Capitol Police that are on each side of this particular issue. I mean, we've even seen the accounts or heard the accounts from witnesses that we presented. But this does relate to the underlying question as to whether or not, I'm going to withdraw the question, Judge. I'm going to withdraw it. Let's move into the trip itself, Representative Eastman. And what I'd like to do first is talk about what was the first catalyst to you going to Washington, D.C. You had mentioned that you wanted to go hear the speech from President Trump. I think that was on direct when plaintiff called you as a witness. What was the first written notice that you received of that particular event on January 6th from the president?
I couldn't really say all the different ways that I heard, but I know I saw a tweet from the president that he was encouraging people to come, that he would be giving a speech on January 6th. And, I hadn't had an opportunity to hear the president speak in person before. It was going to be one of his last, as president. I wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to go and hear him in person, not just for myself, but to be able to tell my kids about that, when they're old enough to be asking those kinds of questions.
And if I can approach Judge.
Yes.
Turn your attention to Exhibit AE. What is that?
That is a tweet from President Trump on December 27th. It says, "See you in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. Don't miss it. Important or information to follow."
Is that the first notice that you recall receiving from President Trump?
Yeah, I know there were a lot of notices. I know there's another one on the second page a couple days later.
And what exhibit are you looking at now?
This is page 2.
Of AE? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and what does it say?
January 6th, see you in D.C., exclamation point, all capitals.
But at that point, you're already on Washington, D.C. after that tweet on January 6th.
On December 30th, I think I had already purchased my plane tickets by that point, but, or the 31st, one of the two. But in any case, I know there were a number of messages sent out, and I'm sure I saw more than one of them.
And this has already been admitted into evidence, but you reviewed Exhibit AM, Alpha Mike.
I don't see it in here, sorry. Yes.
And that accurately reflects your travel itinerary?
Yeah, I don't think the itinerary itself changed after I purchased the tickets.
Okay. And, there was some discussion, we heard this in Mr. Martin's testimony regarding pleadings on this case where it was asserted that you received the email from Oath Keepers and then went to Washington, D.C. Is that an accurate reflection of what happened?
No, that's not possible based on the receipts here.
Okay, and with respect to the travel to Washington, D.C., did you bring any Oath Keeper memorabilia with you, any decals, hats,
No,
clothing?
nothing like that.
Did your trip to Washington, D.C. have anything to do with Oath Keepers?
No.
When you traveled to Washington, D.C. was what date?
I left on the 3rd of January and I arrived on January 4th in the afternoon.
And did you bring any weapons with you?
No.
You heard the testimony from Mr. Martin that when he disclosed that he had a ballistic backpack, that you said something to him. What did you tell him?
I didn't really see the point of bringing it, but I guess he did to make someone else happy.
Okay, you didn't bring any type of tactical gear or
No.
ballistic vest or anything like that?
Nothing like that.
Why don't you tell the court, we've already heard some of this from other witnesses, but maybe you're the defendant here, along with the state, but you're the primary defendant. What was the atmosphere like in Washington, D.C. when you went to the president's speech? Has it been accurately reflected by the witnesses' testimony so far?
Well, with respect to Mr. Martin's testimony, I think that was accurate. There's 7 months I lived in D.C., and I got to see that during the transition from a Republican administration to a Democrat administration. So there's a change in atmosphere there for sure as people are moving in and moving out. January 5th, I would say, and we were there in January 4th a little bit, but it wasn't so much January 4th that stood out. It was January 5th and 6th, particularly the, I would say morning and into the early afternoon, was very different D.C. than I was used to. And,
What do you mean by that?
I go back to, I was in D.C. For a school event back in October of 1997. And it was there was that time, and then there was also the morning of January 6th and January 5th. I think they're about the only times I can remember being in DC and people like laughing and talking to each other on the Metro. That's not something you're supposed to do in DC. Everybody wants to get to the office and get home, and looking at people and staring at people and trying to start a conversation is generally frowned upon. But January 5th and 6th, that was not the case. Jovial, I think, is a good way to describe it. And I had the same experience or a similar experience back in 1997. And that was when 3 million Promise Keepers came to DC for their big event on the Wall. And that whole week, DC just was a very different place. And it was much more upbeat and friendly.
So we've heard the testimony from our friend Pat Martin about what happened on the 6th, going to the rally, what took place there, and then returning from the rally. Again, without being cumulative in your testimony or duplicating Mr. Martin's testimony, what aspects did you see or perceive that might be different from what we've heard? Not contradictory necessarily, but had a different perspective than perhaps Mr. Martin had in his testimony.
Well, I suppose my perspective was a little bit different in that I've been to DC many times, have relatives just outside of DC that I've come to visit when I would be on holiday from West Point, and then of course being in DC during my time at West Point, I had an active internship, and that had me staying in DC for part of the summer, and then also living there for about 7 months in the military after I was commissioned. And I think, my impression would be different in that I was more familiar with the lay of the land, where landmarks were, those types of things. So I was comfortable, kind of leading the way. And as we left the rally, we, had a chance to kind of look around, pick up some souvenirs, just kind of wait for the crowds to dissipate. Crowds in DC are not really something I enjoy. I remember when Obama was inaugurated, how crazy that was with all the people in town and the metro stops and all that kind of thing. So as soon as the crowds dissipated, we went in the opposite direction. We didn't go towards the Capitol. We kind of walked away to get away from the crowds. And then I don't remember if we, grabbed a hot dog or what we did. We might have grabbed something on the way there, and we grabbed some souvenirs and whatnot. And then as people were participating in the march, we I think just kind of watched a little bit of that, and took the subway down to one of the stops. I don't remember which one. Closer to the Grant Memorial. There isn't really a stop that's right there. One of the ones that was closer. And so at some point in the afternoon, we ended up at the memorial in time for the pictures with the other Alaskans. I think, like Mr. Martin, I also, observed those in the crowd, saw some of the same things, and but at the same time, probably nothing particularly helpful in this case because we weren't, in the thick crowds at that point. We pretty much stayed away from the thick crowds. As soon as the president stopped speaking, we couldn't avoid him, getting in through the security and going through the Secret Service checkpoint and just being in line there, and then during the speech that the president gave. But after that point, I was glad to, not be in the thick crowd.
So the testimony was that you knew DC, so you were kind of leading you and Pat around the city. Why Grant Memorial after the rally?
That was what was put out on the group Facebook page as far as where a picture would be.
What group?
There was a Alaskans in DC Facebook page that was set up on the 4th or 5th or sometime during the week before the 6th. And it had been put out. I don't remember if I came up with Grant Memorial, if somebody else did, if somebody decided that was going to be where the photo was going to be, so that you wouldn't really be in a position during the rally to kind of get together and find people. There's just too many people. But we're looking for. I was hoping to be able to get a picture with some of my constituents or other Alaskans that had gone to DC. Not all of them were able to make it. Some came earlier than we did, or didn't stay around until all the people were there. But Yeah, there were some of the people that showed up who were in the picture.
Before the rally, and this is one of the things that I forgot to ask you about the 5th. I mean, I guess you actually got there, you had 2 full days before the 6th, is that right?
We got there about 3 o'clock on the 4th, the afternoon.
Okay, so a day and a half. During that time frame, did you do anything related to your legislative duties before the 6th?
Yeah, I reached out to each of the 3 members of Congress for Alaska, and I think 1 or 2 others, and wanted to see, especially those in Alaska, see if they were available to talk. Anytime I'm in DC, it's kind of accustomed to check in and see if any of the Alaska congressionals are available, and either get a picture with them or just a brief chat. Also wanted to talk to them about the events of that week and how they were perceiving things, and encourage them not to simply use the events on January 6th to be a rubber stamp and ignore the concerns that I was hearing, even as a state legislator.
So there was an exhibit that was shown to you during your direct under Plaintiffs Counsel's examination several days ago, Exhibit AB, if you would turn to that, please.
B as in boy?
A is in Alpha, B is in Bravo.
Yes, I
And I'm
have.
directing your attention to the second tweet on that page. I think it's January 5th.
Okay.
And what was that tweet about? Why did you post it? And what is its content?
I think that was to let my constituents and others who might be in DC know that I was there or was heading there and would be able to possibly interact with people and field questions. I don't remember to what extent that was the exact same as what I posted on Facebook. I know this is a copy of Twitter, but I suspect I probably wrote the exact same thing on the Facebook page that I manage.
And what does this tweet say?
It says, "I will be in Washington, D.C. tomorrow, along with other Alaskans, to advocate for the Constitution and encourage members of Congress to do their duty by it during tomorrow's counting of the votes for president."
And so in writing that, what were you perceiving the duties of Congress to be in counting the votes?
To do their due diligence and hearing or at least making sure they understood what the objections were before simply voting to certify.
Is this the first time in your knowledge that the presidential certification has had any opposition?
No, I think it pretty much has opposition every time there's a president elected.
And have there been acts by parties against the incoming president in pretty much every election in your knowledge and understanding of history that have had opposition to the certification
I
process?
know there's been objections lodged formally to every Republican president this century.
And with respect to your efforts to convince the congressional delegation to do their duty, other than contacting their offices, posting this tweet, did you do anything else?
I did chat on the phone with at least one of the offices, maybe 2. I'm pretty sure we didn't have a phone conversation with Murkowski's office. There was some difficulty in making contact. One of the email addresses wasn't working and so forth. But with the other 2, I know we were able to raise our concerns or our requests and have a teleconference in one case just to talk through what the issues were, and kind of not as good as an in-person meeting, but COVID was still part of the lay of the land in DC. A lot of the restaurants were closed, the offices, a lot of them were closed, and so meeting outside the Capitol, structure and area was sort of the norm. So I think we had a meeting just online.
I move to admit AB.
No objection.
AB is admitted.
So let's move back to the Grant Memorial after that slight detour. Pictures were taken with Alaskans that had joined the Facebook post group, Alaskans in DC.
Yeah, I don't know if they had joined or not, but somehow or other they got the message. I think it went out by text to different people who were in DC that might have seen the message on the group. If they weren't a member, I don't know.
How many Alaskans were present at that time that the pictures were taken? Do you recall?
Goodness. In DC, you mean? Or?
No, at that picture at Grant.
Oh, however many people are in the picture. I don't remember if the person taking it was from Alaska or was just a passerby, but roughly that many. I know there were a few that were there a few minutes before the picture was taken and they had to leave to go somewhere else. And I think there were some folks that showed up after the picture was taken and were sad they missed it, but you know, it's like 10 people or however many are in the picture.
Okay. And after that picture was taken, how long until after that did you leave the Grant Memorial area?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I know we didn't take the picture right at the time we were supposed to. I'm vaguely thinking it might have been 4:30 is when the scheduled time was. Don't quote me on that. But I know we were kind of waiting around for people to show up, and so it happened at some point after that, and then you know, we both sort of went their separate ways a little while after that, but I couldn't tell you how long.
So it was sometime after that picture was taken that you could see from where you were at that there was some form of a disturbance or maybe even riot at the Capitol?
The riots really weren't something you could see up close. I mean, at least I didn't have any binoculars or anything like that. We could see that there were Capitol Police. We could see that there were you know, folks waving flags, but I never observed anyone in an altercation, or I didn't see anybody hitting a police officer or, you know, hitting a protester or anything like that.
When did you become aware that there had been violence at the Capitol building?
I'm not sure. I know it was really difficult to get you know, texts or you know, updates from the internet. That wasn't really generally available. I think I might have had a couple of phone calls during the day. I know on our way to the Grant Memorial, I had a conversation with a reporter from Alaska. And so, you know, the cell phones were working at least sometimes, but not consistently. So as far as when we found out, I'm guessing it's probably a lot later than when it actually happened, because we just didn't have the way to get, you know, current news.
Well, at some point, Mr. Martin testified that he received a curfew notice that came through to his phone that had been turned off and somehow turned on his phone.
Yeah.
At that point, did you know that there was some sort of disturbance at the Capitol building, or do you recall?
I got the same notice. I don't remember it saying, you know, somebody was shot or something like that. I think it just said, you know, there's a curfew in effect. It wasn't particularly long. I don't remember exactly what it said.
Well, by the next day, you knew something had happened.
Oh, no, by that night, you know, we knew something. I just talking with people on the street as we were walking, you know, to the metro and on the metro and so forth. But I just don't remember when the first time we heard was.
Okay, and when, do you recall how soon after receiving the curfew notice on your phone that you left the Grant Memorial to go back to where you were staying?
Goodness. Probably pretty quickly, but I can't remember if there, I know there was another legislator from another state who had wanted to link up with me, and I think we met her and her family at the Grant Memorial too. She might have come a little bit after that, so we might have had to stay later than we would have, you know, normally, just to link up and have that meeting. Probably after that meeting, I don't know that we had really anything else to do to stick around. I think the word had come out that there, you know, wasn't going to be any kind of announcement of a certification vote or anything like that, so kind of the idea of staying there just kind of seemed pointless.
So you heard Mr. Martin's testimony that you know, his concern about people making up things about what you were doing in Washington, D.C. actually was realized. And he mentioned the story of the Midnight Sun. Were there other reports that also suggested that you had actually taken part in the violence that occurred at the Capitol building that you're aware of?
Oh, sure. I received, you know, lots of emails telling me about all the violent insurrectionist things that I had done.
And were you in any way supportive of the violence that you later found out had been committed at the Capitol building?
No.
I'd like to turn you to Exhibit AG, Alpha Golf. You tell the court what that is and what date it was written?
That is a Facebook post that I wrote on January 7th. I don't remember if that was late in the evening on the 6th, but my guess is probably, you know, early morning, January 7th.
Okay, and if you would, just read that for the court, please.
4 Americans are dead today and a number of others injured an unprovoked attack on our nation's Capitol building and on those inside it. My heart is heavy today for the families of those whose lives were lost and for those who are injured in their families. I personally had friends in the Capitol building today working in Congress in various capacities. Due to security concerns, some of them, while unharmed, were locked down for several hours and were only able to leave the building late this evening. Having worked alongside the Capitol Police during my time in the military, I'm very grateful for the many good men and women in the Capitol who stood in the front lines today to prevent lawlessness and further loss of life. Those who engage in that lawlessness should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. In the same way, the 99% of those who took part in the various events in D.C. today and who held vigil outside the Capitol building peacefully while today's votes were counted should not be maligned for doing so. If you think that the members of Antifa or any other group who were assaulting police officers at the Capitol today were doing so because of something said by the president, then you know neither Antifa nor the president. I was present at the March to Save America today and heard everything in the president's speech. There was no call to violence or lawlessness of any kind. And for the vast majority of those around the Capitol building today, we were unable to see that violence. That violence of any kind had taken place, and cell service was, for the most part, non-existent due to the more than 500,000 people in attendance. Peaceful demonstrators don't vandalize property, assault police officers, and tear down fences. They don't carry flex cuffs and force their way onto the floor of Congress. They don't wear armor and carry weapons in anticipation of a conflict with police inside the Capitol building. These are not the marks of those engaged in a peaceful demonstration, but those who intended from the outset to engage in a violent riot. Those who planned and carried out today's attacks should be speedily identified and put before a jury of their peers for public trial so that our nation never again has to experience an attack at their hands. Our elected officials and those who work in the Capitol should not be placed in fear for their safety for doing so, nor should those who provide security on their behalf, regardless of how capable and well-trained they may be. Likewise, those who demonstrate peacefully should not fear being maligned for having the courage to travel to the Capitol so that their concerns may be heard. Let us purpose to treat today's attack upon our Capitol with the seriousness it deserves so that this tragedy will never again be repeated on our watch.
So, first I'd like to move to admit Exhibit AG.
I have no objection to page 1 of AG, but there's more posts and more pages that don't seem tied to this post, so I would object to any of the other pages coming in.
Mr. Miller, instead of respect to the other 6 pages?
You know what, Judge, that's a fair point, so let me just go through the rest of this before we put AG away. So I'll suspend my request for it to be admitted pending additional questions. So let's look at the rest of this exhibit. What is that page 2?
Page 2 is a Facebook post I put out just to describe, you know, what were the different events that were going on the 5th, and on the 6th there was probably a dozen or more different events that were going on.
Where did this MAGA rally map guide come from?
Great question. I have no idea. Either somebody sent it to me or I found it searching online.
What did is there any chance it came from the Oath Keepers?
No.
Is there anything about the Oath Keepers on it?
No.
Okay. And that's more of the same on page 3.
Yeah, there's links to the March to Save America rally page. They had a web page. There was a Trump March page, and there was a Jericho March page. So just 3 of the different events, I think.
So we heard about the Jericho March. We heard about March to Save America. What's the Trump March? Where do you know?
Great question. I have no idea.
All right. And that was posted when?
It's sometime on January 5th. I can't see the timestamp.
And back up to the second page. I want to make sure we have the date on that. When was that posted?
Also on the 5th.
Okay. So let's turn next to page 4.
And I might have seen a flyer in the streets or a sticker on a metro stop. Found the link that way.
So does page 4 refresh your recollection about how the picture of the Alaskans at the Grant Memorial was broadcast?
Yeah, I don't think that was the picture itself. I think this was the announcement that went out, and it was 4 o'clock instead of 4:30 to get together for a picture with other Alaskans.
But it says gathering for a photo of Alaskans in D.C. at 4 p.m.
Yeah, I think my recollection is that message went out sometime early in the morning on January 6th or sometime in the morning so that people would have enough time to get the word and get there for the picture.
Okay. And then page 5, That's just a still from the video that we saw earlier, is that right?
That's what it appears to be.
And then page 6, the same? Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is that an accurate representation
Yeah,
of the crowd that you saw on January 6th at the rally?
that's a photo that Mr. Martin had taken, and that was near where we had spent, I think, most of our time during the day. But this looks like this is after the president done speaking and people were starting to leave.
Were you with Pat when this photo was taken on page 6?
Yes, I would have been.
And does that seem to reflect, or is that an accurate representation of the crowd at the time that you were standing next to Mr. Martin on the 6th when he took that photo?
Yes, it's an accurate reflection.
And then page 7, the final page of Exhibit AG, what is that?
That's the Facebook post I put out last year, which is basically a link to the interview that Gunter and Stewart Rhodes did about what happened with the fall of the Berlin Wall.
So, with reference to earlier testimony, if you click on the link that's part of this Facebook post, you would go to the actual interview with that former lieutenant colonel of the East German Armed Forces who refused an order when the Berlin Wall came down. Is that correct?
Yes, and he's an Oath Keeper in Texas.
Okay. Now move to admit the entirety of Exhibit AG.
No objection.
All right, AG is admitted.
Okay, there has been some discussion again on the direct examination that you had with Plaintiffs' Counsel several days ago about the letters that you wrote to who you think may be members of the board of Oath Keepers. That's Exhibit Z, if you could turn to that exhibit. And Judge, I'm not sure, has that been admitted yet, Z as in Zulu?
I don't believe it has, no.
Okay,
I think I need the other blue binder for that one.
okay. May I approach?
Yes.
And just let me know after you're there and you've looked at that exhibit, please.
Yes, I'm there.
Okay, are these letters that you wrote and sent, or emails that you wrote and sent?
Yes, a combination of letters and emails.
Okay, what was your purpose in writing and sending them?
I was trying to make contact with someone in Oath Keepers. It had been over 18 months now since I received an email or any kind of communication from Oath Keepers, and I wanted to find out how the board was going to be responding to the convictions that were announced earlier this year for Oath Keepers members, including Stewart Rhodes.
And did you get a response to any of these emails or letters?
No, I have no confirmation that they were received, no response.
Okay. And what did you intend to do with the information that you would receive in response to these letters? Or let me ask it this way, better yet. If you get a response to these letters that say, we aren't doing anything about people that are convicted, they can remain members of Oath Keepers, have you decided what you want to do in that event?
Yeah, I don't see how I would be interested in staying a part of Oath Keepers if that was the situation. I think it's pretty clear in their bylaws, what they should do. And if, it's been asserted that, somehow, based on no evidence that I can find, that Oath Keepers doesn't care about their bylaws or doesn't care about them anymore. If that, in fact, is the case, then, it's not the organization for me, but I just wanted to inquire and do some due diligence to see if that was in fact the case.
You heard Stewart Rhodes' testimony earlier today concerning his leadership or, I'm not sure, I don't want to put words in your mouth, how we want to characterize that. Do you currently perceive him to be the active leader of Oath Keepers?
No.
And why is that?
I haven't seen any active leadership from Oath Keepers from him or anyone else. And I think based on his testimony and talking with him, it's clear that he doesn't consider himself that his membership is effectively suspended at this point, and maybe permanently if his appeal doesn't go through. So I don't see what Stewart Rhodes is doing or saying at this point being on behalf of Oath Keepers.
How much time are you going to give these letters to get a response back so you can make a decision?
I don't know. I wasn't able to confirm at the outset that any of these individuals actually are members of the board of Oath Keepers. So if they're not, I can see why they wouldn't respond. If the addresses I had were bad, I can see also why I wouldn't be getting a response. So I had asked for a response, unfortunately hadn't gotten one. So maybe still looking to figure out who in fact is leading Oath Keepers. From everything I've seen, it's effectively a dormant organization right now. Maybe some of those individuals who are on that board are waiting for things like appeals to finish before they take action or make some kind of announcement. But at this point, I've seen nothing in over 18 months.
Move to amend Exhibit Z.
No objection.
Exhibit Z is admitted.
Have you ever posted anything about Oath Keepers on social media, to your knowledge?
Yeah, I'm sure I mentioned that interview for the fall of the wall, but other than that, I don't remember if I have. My guess is I probably haven't, because there's a lot of groups that I'm involved in. I get a lot of emails, don't get a chance to read all of them, and I think it's unique when something like that shows up and I have time to forward it. A lot of the stuff that is probably worth forwarding, I don't, just for lack of time.
Is there anything else that you want the court to consider in making its decision regarding your association with Oath Keepers in this case?
Yeah, I'd like to make it clear to the court that, to the extent that Oath Keepers, becomes some kind of organization committed to.
What's the exhibit number?
I've marked it as 51.
Thank you.
Would you like to approach?
Yes. Mr. Dedukian, you said this was 51?
I believe we're at 51. I hope so. I hope I didn't.
That's where I would be at. Madam Clerk, do you agree? All right, 51.
Representative Eastman, there's been testimony throughout this trial about an article you wrote that I handed to you just now. I believe the title of the article is "Trump Lost and Jeffrey Epstein Killed Himself." Can you review that exhibit and confirm whether that is an article that you indeed wrote?
And Judge, while he's doing that, I'm going to object as to outside the scope. If you wanted to examine Representative Eastman on this, you could have done that on direct and call him as a witness in his case.
Mr. Dedukian, what does this relate to on direct?
Your Honor, it's generally relevant to the testimony provided about why Representative Eastman was in D.C. on January 6th, which was almost the entirety of the testimony on direct, and so this goes to impeach that testimony.
All right, I'll, if it, yep, so objections overruled.
Yeah, it appears to be an article that I wrote on January 5th.
I would move for the admission of 51.
Well, I mean, the relevance objection stands until it indicates where somehow this impeaches my client's testimony.
All right, let's go a little bit more towards an
Okay,
impeachment.
1 second. Is it your testimony, Representative Eastman, that your purpose in going to Washington was not to get Congress to stop certification of the election?
No, my ask to each of the members of Congress that represent me was that they do their due diligence and allow the objections to be heard and then before they make a decision, consider all the information that their fellow members of Congress would put forward.
So when you went to Washington, part of your plan was to meet with the congressional delegation from Alaska, is that right?
If possible, yes.
And just so I'm understanding you correctly, you weren't trying to persuade them to not certify the presidential election, is that your testimony?
No, my ask to them was much more modest. It was simply that they not effectively rubber stamp, what was taking place with the objections, that they allow the objections to be heard before voting on certification.
Well, in this article that you wrote on January 5th, which is the same day that you met with at least 2 of the members of Congress from Alaska, right, on January 5th?
I think it would have been January 5th that I probably had my contact with all 3 of the offices, so it might have been a little bit of January 4th too.
Okay. In this article that you wrote on January 5th, you said point blank that Congress should not certify the winner of the presidential election, right?
Correct.
Okay. I'd also like you to turn to exhibit, I'm sorry, just give me 1 second. I lost my place. Can you turn to exhibit AF as in Frank?
Yes.
Before I ask you about the exhibit, you, in addition to publishing the article on your website, you also wrote an open letter to Alaska's congressional delegation, correct?
Yeah, I specifically contacted each of them specifically and made my request to them. I also signed on to a public letter, I think earlier to that at some point before I contacted them directly.
And if you look at Exhibit AF, it has 12 pages. It looks like a series of email communications that you had with staffers in Alaska's, in the offices of Alaska's congressional delegation, trying to set up a meeting around January 5th.
Correct.
And you attached to those communications the open letter that we just discussed?
I don't remember the open letter being a part of those communications, no.
Well, look at Exhibit AF 7 of 12.
Yes.
And it looks like on 7 of 12, that's an email that you wrote on January 3rd to somebody named William G. Deaton at gmail.com. Do you know who that person is?
Yes, he had written an open letter to Alaska Congressional Delegation and was looking for thoughts from myself and others. So there were some conversations that happened on that letter.
And if you look at Exhibit AF, page 8 of 12 and 9 of 12, is that the letter you're referencing?
I believe so.
And it looks like there are some red line changes to the letter. Are those changes that you made to the letter?
I would guess that at least some of them are. I don't remember exactly who made which changes.
And this is an open letter to Alaska's congressional delegation. It has all 3 members of Congress. At the time, it was Congressman Young and Senators Murkowski and Sullivan listed on the letter. And at the end of the letter is a summary of essentially the ask of the members of Congress from Alaska, right?
I think that's a fair assessment, sure.
Right, so the ask was to, above all, we ask for your commitment that you will not vote to certify a single elector whose appointment was secured through illegally cast votes. Is that the gist of the message that you then?
Which page are we on?
We're on Exhibit F9 of 12.
Okay.
Let me read that language for you again so you can follow along with me. It says, quote, "Above all, we ask for your commitment that you will not vote to certify a single elector whose appointment was secured through illegally cast votes." Is that the gist of the message that you then conveyed to Alaska's congressional delegation?
No, my message that I conveyed directly to the members of Congress and their staff was very specific, and it was to do their due diligence and to ensure that they listen to the objections from their fellow members of Congress before making a decision.
Okay, earlier on in this letter that you helped edit, it says, quote, "The evidence is unequivocal. There was a concerted effort to steal this election from President Trump and Vice President Pence." Did you convey that message to Alaska's congressional delegation?
No, and I'm not sure what the final version of the letter looked, or even how many revisions it went through. I just know that at some point in that process, he asked for some comments. I think we had a conversation on the phone while, about the same time, maybe even the same exact time as I was looking over the letter. He asked for my feedback, so we had a conversation about it.
I would move for the admission of AF.
There's a lot of other material in this. I don't even think we've established authorship yet, that particular letter. We've established that Representative Eastman was part of the editing process of that particular letter. But unless they have the final letter, I'm not sure what help that gives us in this case.
Mr. Duduki?
Well, let me ask some more questions. So the letter, let me back up. This email chain that's Exhibit AF includes a series of communications that you had with staffers for Alaska's congressional delegation, right?
Yes.
And included in this email chain is a copy of the letter that we just talked about that you helped edit, right?
No, I don't believe that those were connected.
Okay, this is an exhibit that is in your exhibit binder. Are you saying that the letter should not have been connected to the rest of the emails?
No, what I'm saying is that there were many different emails sent to many different parties. I think roughly each page is a different email to a different party. The one you're talking about is on page 7, which was sent to William Deaton. It was involving the congressional delegation, but it wasn't communicated to the congressional delegation. The final letter, whatever that ended up being, I believe was communicated by William Deaton to the congressional party, but I was not a part of that process.
Was that the kind of letter that people could just sign on to before it was sent to the delegation?
I believe so, yeah.
And did you sign on to the letter?
I did, yes.
And do you still have a copy of that letter?
I do not.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it was taken down once it was submitted.
And I just want to verify one more time that these red line changes to the letter, were those changes that you made or somebody else made to the letter?
I know I made some of them, but I couldn't tell you what it looked like when it first got to me, if it already had changes there and I was just adding to them or whatnot.
Your Honor, I'm going to move on and reserve moving it in potentially pending further testimony.
You can continue.
Since we're talking about exhibits, I also want to ask you some questions about Exhibit Z, and then we can kind of go back and address some stuff more chronologically. But let's start with Exhibit Z. Those are the emails and letters that you sent to the Oath Keepers organization, right?
Can you point me again to where we're looking?
Exhibit Z.
Yes, those were letters that I sent personally.
And can you tell me how you got the contact information for these people?
Yes, I was asking around and looking, and I received the contact information with the caveat that he wasn't sure it was accurate from my attorney.
Okay. Yeah, so privileged communications, of course, we'd object to, and I directed Mr. Representative Eastman not to communicate. I mean, obviously, we can work around those contours if we need to in the testimony, but nothing specifically. that my honest full view should be testified to in court.
You know, I wasn't trying to get that kind of.
I understand, we'll move on.
To your knowledge, Representative Eastman, did these contact addresses and emails and phone numbers come from Stewart Rhodes?
No, not to my knowledge.
And it looks like for each of the people that you wrote, or I take that back, for 4 of the people that you wrote, excepting Bobby Kinch, you had an address, a telephone number, and, well, strike that. For some of the people that you wrote, you had an address, telephone number, and email address, correct?
For some of them, yes.
And so, for example, Rocky Twitchell, what is your understanding of his involvement in the Oath Keepers right now?
I have no idea what his past, present, or future involvement is.
It looks like you had a telephone number for Rocky Twitchell. Did you try calling him to?
I did not.
Wait, let me finish my question. Did you try calling him to have your questions about Stewart Rhodes and the other convicted Oath Keepers answered personally by him?
No.
Did you try calling any of the other individuals for whom you had a phone number?
No, I did not.
Were your letters that were sent to these addresses returned by the post office?
No.
Were any of the emails that you sent returned to you as undeliverable?
I don't recall immediately if they were. I think most of them were not. There might have been one that was turned back. I don't remember.
And do you recall the testimony from Stewart Rhodes earlier today that John Siemens is now acting as the president of the Oath Keepers while Rhodes is incarcerated?
Yes, that's what I heard him say.
And you got no response from him either about whether they were going to remove Rhodes from the organization?
That's correct.
And it's been about, I guess tomorrow, if my math is right, it'll be 3 weeks since you sent these letters.
Not quite, no.
So you sent, or when did you send the letters?
The one here I'm looking at right now says December 2nd, so we're coming up on 3 weeks, but we're not there yet.
And can you help me see where the date of the letter is? I don't.
I'm on page 6 and 7. At the top, it says Friday, December 2nd.
So that's the email you sent to Siemens. That one was sent on December 2nd. Your first email in these series of communications was sent to Rocky Twitchell on November 30th, correct?
Correct.
And the letters are undated. Do you have the date on which you sent them out?
I'm pretty sure that I sent the email to Mr. Twitchell and the mail separately, so those did not happen on the same day. I think as I got the information that was passed to me, I used it, but I think I started off maybe with only an email address or 2 email addresses, and then I received the rest of the contact information as it came through later on.
Did I hear you correctly that if Stewart Rhodes and the other Oath Keepers who have either been convicted or pleaded guilty to seditious conspiracy charges and other felonies are not removed from the organization, that your plan is then to resign from the Oath Keepers?
Yeah, if the plan is just to ignore their bylaws, then I would. If that became the case, then it would be clear that it's not the organization that I joined.
So the 3 weeks approximately, give or take a few days, that have passed since you sent these communications, that in your mind that hasn't been long enough for you to determine if the Oath Keepers actually enforces its bylaws?
At present, my understanding is that the organization is doing nothing, has been dormant for over 18 months. If it's in dormant status, I wouldn't expect them to be doing anything.
Well, that's not exactly consistent with what Stewart Rhodes testified to, is it?
I can't tell you what he testified to.
Well, would you expect a dormant organization to have an acting president?
I could see that happening. I'm not aware of anything that this acting president has actually done.
So I'm just trying to understand what it will take for you to actually resign from the Oath Keepers. So it sounds like you're waiting to make a determination of whether the organization is dormant or not, right? That's part of what you're waiting on?
No, the dormancy is just what I'm observing. From a legal perspective, I think they were expected to file some updates to their annual reports. They were going to have, by their requirements with the Nevada, I think there's some paperwork obligations they have that they haven't, kept up to date on. I don't know the reasons why. I really can't speculate. All I can say is I haven't seen any activity at all from the Oath Keepers in a long time.
Okay, so help me understand, how much time is it going to take, since you sent these communications, for you to be able to determine if the Oath Keepers is going to enforce the bylaws or not?
I don't have an answer to that. I know they're, the party of a lawsuit, and some of their other leadership, I think, are still going through the court process. Obviously, Stewart Rhodes is still going through the court process. I could certainly see if an organization like Oath Keepers is having all that happen, maybe they're waiting before they make a decision what they're going to do.
Well, when you sent these communications, you were actually requesting an immediate response from them, right? You weren't anticipating this extended period of waiting to hear whether Rhodes was going to be removed from the organization or not.
No, I didn't have any expectation. Again, the information came to me and said, here's some contact information that may or may not be correct for some individuals who may or may not be on the board of Oath Keepers. I figured it was worth taking a shot, but I didn't have any expectation about when or if I would receive a reply.
But you requested an immediate reply.
I did.
And my question to you is, how much time do you think will be sufficient for you to be able to determine if the Oath Keepers is going to enforce their bylaws or not?
I don't know. I suppose if the organization becomes active tomorrow and they've decided at that point that they're going to move forward as an organization and go back to doing what they're doing and not honoring their bylaws in that process, then that would be enough time for me to make my decision.
So let's say by January 31st of 2023, you haven't received a response to your letters. Would that be enough time for you to make a decision?
Again, Judge, I think it's asking the answer to also calls for speculation.
Mr. Dudukian?
I'm just trying to, I don't think that particular question was answered. I don't think I gave a specific time frame. And
I don't think it was either. You can ask the question, but at a certain point, he's explained that he doesn't know exactly what it is.
Well, let me just ask that one more and I'll move on. So would January 31st, 2023, if you haven't received a response by then, would that be enough time for you?
I don't know what the state of Oath Keepers is. I don't know if they have any board members other than what we just heard, that they have an acting president. Is the acting president the only member of the board left, and he's looking for board members so that he can bring life back in the organization? I just don't know. I reached out to the individual. I haven't heard back one way or another. I know that there's some health and medical issues involved, so I'm sure that's also a factor. But I would suspect, again, all I can do is speculate, that some of the court happenings are probably impacting making decisions, or the organization deciding whether it's going to close its doors for good or it's going to come back together. All I can say is what I've observed as a member who used to be on the email list is that if I still am, they haven't sent out any emails in over 18 months.
And Your Honor, if I can ask one more, and then I think we're at 4:30. But so, Representative Eastman, the fact that at least 9 Oath Keepers have pled or pleaded, I don't know, people say it differently, pleaded guilty to various felonies associated with January 6th, going back to April of this year and before, that's still not enough time for you to decide if the organization is going to enforce its bylaws?
I'm looking at a dormant organization. I don't think a dormant organization is in a position to enforce anything. So I don't think I should hold them to a standard of being a normal active organization, because it's clear that they're not.
I think I'm going to move on, so if we want to stop now, that we could.
If that's a good natural stopping spot, then yes.
Yeah.
We've reached the end of the days. Representative Eastman, you can return to the legislative attorney. Any matters that we need to take up at the end of today?
2 housekeeping matters, Your Honor.
Yes.
One, as far as the supplemental briefing, I know we discussed deferring it till tomorrow. Are we still going to keep that midnight deadline, or do we want to make it earlier?
Mr. Miller, did the two of you have a preference?
Midnight, Judge. I'm
So
a
essentially-
solo.
I get it. So, that sort of brings me to the next question that I have for the parties. It sounds to me, I was personally sincerely hoping we could close tomorrow at the end of evidence, but I recognize that we've got a couple witnesses still that we have to get through, and then the parties are going to probably need some time to pull things together. And so it sounds like we're moving closings to Wednesday morning. If we're all on the same page that can happen by then.
Either that or, Judge, if you wanted to do closing sometime later, and that be done by video connect, I could accommodate that. I know, Judge, that you're gonna wanna get a decision out, I recognize that. You know, the convenience of the court, if you're planning on not being here on Wednesday, we're flexible and we'll accommodate, and we can do closing by remote link, that's fine.
Well, to be frank, I would prefer that just because it saves me 2 hours of driving time. That's 2 hours that I can be working. And, you know, we're all on tight deadlines. And so if you're open to doing closings by remote, I would invite that. I think that's appropriate. We can also do it later in the day if that's something else that you're asking for, so that you have a little bit more time.
The problem is, and I'm sure that this is something that's confronting a number of individuals associated with this case. I'm flying out of state for Christmas. I know that Mr. Dedukian also is out of state with respect to his practice and his family. It's going to be very difficult immediately following Wednesday to do anything, and even Wednesday afternoon, I'm headed back to Fairbanks. So if we don't do it Wednesday morning, then, and again, Judge, you know, your time frame, I understand, is tight given the other issues relating to Representative Eastman taking his seat. And of course, it's his preference also that resolution be rendered quickly. I think the earliest that I could do it, if it's not done Wednesday morning.
And Mr. Rowley, if we can't do it Wednesday morning, or if you can't do it later in that day, then it needs to be Wednesday morning.
Okay, then that it is.
Just that's the time frame that I need to get my work done so that the case can continue to move
Very
forward.
well.
But yes, I would approve, basically midnight on the Tuesday for the briefing. You know, that way at least each party will have a chance to look at what the other party has proposed in the morning. Then we'll move into closings, and then I'll do my best to get a decision out as quick as possible.
And we have been trying to get a hold of Colonel John Siemens for a long time. We would like him to testify, have not had success in getting him. If he does come on, it will be very brief. But just so that council knows what we're doing, obviously we'll finish up with Representative Eastman when he's done, and I don't know if he has a projection as to how much time that's going to take. We have Stewart Rhodes to finish, and then we have John Eastman. We're actually probably will fit John Eastman, Dr. John Eastman in after Representative, well, not fit in, because 9 o'clock is when Stewart Rhodes is going to be testifying. So it'll be Stewart Rhodes in the morning, then Representative Eastman. We'll close out with John Eastman unless we can somehow slide Colonel Siemens into the mix.
Understood. All right.
And so we intend to be done tomorrow, but who knows?
It's between the weather and the other connection issues, we all, you know, had to be flexible, so I understand. Mr. Dedukian?
I don't have I think we should be able to get done tomorrow. As far as closings, whatever the court prefers. I think if the court doesn't want to drive out to Palmer, I would be okay with doing it by Zoom, just for the closing part of it. And are there other issues? I think those were the two that you had mentioned. So,
I think that was it.
yeah. But one last housekeeping. I know that Mr. Miller had moved in Mr. Guandolo's expert report. If that report's going to come in, then we would move in our expert reports as well.
I think I had not admitted either, or any of the expert reports, because all the experts had testified, and your request was to not move yours in, and so I just took the expert's testimony.
Oh, okay.
I think, Judge, that actually Mr. Guandolo's did get admitted, but there had been no movement to evidence of the other two expert reports. And of course, we'd object to that. I mean, if you're going to allow those in, then we certainly want the depositions to come in as well. And I guess that would be a way to address that, is that, again, we use the depositions and that testimony. So we move in both depositions, and I guess I'd have no objection to the expert testimony coming in as well in the report form.
I appreciate it. Hold on, I just wanted, so do you have Exhibit 10 that's being admitted?
We do have time to speak.
16. Okay, my memory was wrong. I had admitted Mr. Guandolo's expert report.
I think taking the entire deposition transcript into evidence without it having been questioned on and objections ruled on would be improper. So if that's going to be the condition for admitting the expert reports, then we would withdraw the request. But I would say that I think the reports should be treated consistently. So if Mr. Guandolo's comes in, then our report should come in, or they should all stay out. And we don't really have a preference either way. I think the usual practice is not to admit them if the experts testify. But if any of them are going to come in, then I think all of them should come in.
And I'll reserve ruling on it until the morning. This is a longer argument, or a longer conversation to have.
Understood.
Anything else to address?
No, Your Honor.
This evening? Right.
No,
So,
thank you, Judge.
it sounds like we'll have Mr. Rhodes back at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Hopefully, a good phone connection. It was certainly better the first time around, so that's cool. With that, we stand in recess. Have a good afternoon.
All right, thank you guys all for being here today. It has been phenomenal. This is Monday, the Kowalke versus Eastman case. Tomorrow morning, bright and early, we will have Stewart Rhodes back on the stand, cross-examination by the plaintiff, prosecutor for the Kowalke, and then we'll move right back into David Eastman back on the stand, and then it sounds like it's going to be Eastman Sr., if I caught it correctly, that'll be taking the stand after that. If you haven't liked and shared this video by now, what is your problem? You are the reason why nothing is happening. It takes a community working together, making sure that people are well informed. Back in the olden days, we used to sit in our churches and do this, or stand at the fence line and talk to our neighbors, or have community potlucks on a weekly basis. Or back in my parents' day, they would all be meeting and doing their square dancing on a Friday and Saturday night, doing the do-si-do and communicating with each other what is going on within their community. And it takes an army out there, and by an army I mean every person, individual, working together, speaking up and standing up and making sure your voices are being heard. And one way you could do that right now is by liking and sharing this video. You can find this broadcast on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook at Politadick and Politadick Unfiltered. It should be migrating over to Rumble within the next few hours or so, within the next 12 at most. And we are working hard to get our website back up and running again so that you can show your support for what we are doing. All proceeds go right back into making sure we can continue making sure we can afford to get these live to all of you, unfiltered and uncut. We will see you all tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Thanks for being here today. Again, once again, like and share.
Why don't I give you that email? They're probably going to be fast.
Yeah, I am too, actually. I'm actually going to a family trip in Israel.
Oh, good.
Even farther. How well do you know Israel? Nice. Yeah, my family lives kind of on the coast of the top.
All those that are still tuning in at this point, I will be back again at 7 p.m. at the Alaska School of Government. Tune in, like and share, get an update about what happened today, plus a whole lot more at 7 p.m. tonight at Real Life Church, Alaska School of Government.
So I assume you're from there?
Yeah, I am.
So, yeah, I'll why don't I give you probably the best email is Miller Law.
Miller Law.
Yeah.